So yeah, I'm glad to finally be able to do this.
Shut the hell up while I finish. I'm willing to
I'm
concede
not putting up
that
with your.
that's cool.
You're a worthless sack of.
All right. Yo! I clearly asked you a specific question, and you're not answering my. So you're not going to answer my question. You don't remember? You were just going to. I got it. So you were just going to read. You were going to read through your little paper as opposed to answering the question. So you're not even engaging in a conversation anymore. You're just trying to read data. So I accepted your data. I accepted your data. So, for example, if maybe you find out that your school has been improperly calculating your GPA and such that you've lost 2 points. Like you've lost a point. I'm sorry, half a point on your GPA just because of some accounting error, whatever it has been, right? And so then at this point, your school says, "Okay, I'm sorry, we improperly did this to you. So for this next semester, we're going to give you a 0.5 advantage to offset the difference caused by us disadvantaging you the 0.5 on your GPA." And so then that way, it will equal out by the end of the year that you will be fairly assessed the way everyone else is. Then that wouldn't be favoritism for you for that year, because the only thing that they're doing is offsetting a previous disadvantage. In order for it to be favoritism, it would be that all things would have to be equal and you would be favoring or advantaging another person unfairly, right?
Yeah, but that only works if the actor that treated you unfavorably is the one that's making amends by now treating you to make up for that. So, for example, let's say, yeah, sure it would. Like, for example, in this example, if one school, right, screwed up and screwed someone's GPA up, and so then you move on to another school and they accurately tabulate your GPA there, but then say, you know what, we're going to give you an increased 2.0 because your last school screwed you up 2.0. No, that's not an accurate reflection, nor is it making amends. Because then, like, for example, let's say you got a 3.0, right? And school 1 screws you over and gives you a 1.0. School 2, you get a 3.0, but they say, we'll give you a 5.0. You didn't earn a 5.0. And it's not fair to the rest of the students that you're compared to that school give you a 5.0.
We got to stay within the example, though, Rob. We got to stay within the example, because that's not what I would be talking about. Well, the example I specifically talked about wasn't about giving someone a 5.0. It was specifically just giving them a 0.5 to offset the negative 0.5 that they were disadvantaged. And it doesn't have to come specifically from the actors that did the thing themselves. Say, for example, a school itself, they were the ones that were incorrect. Your high school was incorrect in the way that they assessed your GPA, and so you have a 0.5 deficit that's unnecessary or unfounded. That's fine. It's not fine, but say the college you're applying to recognizes the error that the school did in assessing your thing, and so the college says, well, we will be adding on 0.5 to your GPA now that we're aware that your score has been wrong, and we will assess you based off of 0.5 higher, and so we will compare you to people of equal GPAs with the adjustment of an additional 0.5 given to you. Where in that system, maybe the school that did the incorrect assessment might not be the ones fixing the error, but the new school that you're applying to could then do something to offset that difference. And in that case, that would still be fair, and it didn't have to come directly from the actors that did the problem in itself. Would you say that would be fair?
Well, that's different than what you said the first time, because what you said the first time is give a 0.5 increase to the next grade.
Right? Well, sure. Okay, that's so that was one example, and now I'm using a second example because so the first example. Okay, so if we stick with the first example, then it is just the 1 year one person does one thing. Your junior year, there's a negative 0.5, and then on your senior year, they give you a 0.5 advantage in order to offset it. So in that case, that was one example, and in that specific example, would you say that would be oppressive to everyone else who didn't get the 0.5 advantage?
If you're talking, no, I said if the actor that did the incorrect tabulation corrects their error, then that would be an example of not favoritism, but correcting an error. But if a different actor, a different school does it, then that would be an example. They don't have the ability to make that person whole again. Similarly, if you are robbed by someone, right, and then another person decides to compensate you and give you money back, that doesn't make you whole. Right? That's not that person making up for what happened. The only person that can make you whole is the person that aggrieved you in the first place, or the entity that aggrieved you. Now,
not necessarily that either. Well,
Sure.
well, let me address the first thing then, just on that example. Say instead, on your sophomore year, your junior year, this happened to you, and on your senior year, you ended up leaving that school and going to a different high school. You discovered that the other school was unfairly subtracting -0.5 from you and wouldn't fix it, and so you went to a different school, a different high school, and the different high school recognized, like, man, it's really unfortunate that your GPA isn't actually reflective of what it should be, so we will offset your GPA by 0.5. If that second high school did it, it would still rectify the situation as far as you having an accurate assessment of what your grade or what your GPA should be. Would it not?
No, and let me explain why. Because if you're getting into more what we call your second example, even that's different than what you just explained.
It is. It's a different example.
Right. So now this is your third example. The problem with your third example is this. It would be more accurate for that second school to say this. You were unfairly tabulated your junior year, and so we are going to change your official transcript to say that the tabulation of your junior year is more accurately reflected. However, we will not give you bonus points now in your senior year. We will now reflect your grades accurately. Similarly, so this is to answer your point two, right? Your scenario two. Yes, if a school can prove that through their criteria that your grades have been inaccurately calculated, and so they are making an adjustment to accurately calculate what your grades were, then yes, that falls in line with not being favoritism. That's it's a separate actor trying in their interpretation of the data they're viewing to try to accurately get a more accurate picture. It would be similar to this, right? Like if you go to a doctor who's a poor doctor and they put in your official chart a bunch of stuff about you, and then you go to another doctor and that doctor says, look, your body mass is what it is today. I'm not going to change it to say, actually, you're more healthy because that other guy said you were less healthy than you actually were. But what I can do is go back in your chart and accurately reflect what that diagnosis should have been. Those are two different things, and
sure,
I don't have a problem with that.
But okay, well, first off, the second high school doesn't even have the permission because that person wasn't attended at that school. A second high school can't change your official transcripts from the first high school. That's not legal. They can't do that. The official transcript, the official transcript is going to come from the school that you attended. So since that school you attended, that school has the official transcripts, and that school's records are immutable by any other actors, right? So then in this case, the only thing that this school has the ability to do would be to offset it by giving you a 0.5 advantage, thereby giving you the accurate assessment, giving you an accurate GPA. And let me just to be sure really quickly, if the second school gave you a 0.5 advantage in order to offset the negative 0.5 disadvantage, would that be unfair in your opinion? And that's one part. And then the second, would it give you an accurate assessment or an accurate GPA result at the end of the year?
No.
I'm sorry, at the a total GPA, like your total GPA for the 3 years, if they gave you that 0.5 advantage just to offset the negative 0.5 disadvantage, would you get an accurate GPA at the end of the year?
No to both, right?
What?
One, it's unfair. What do you let me explain, right? So, for example, like, will you acknowledge this? There are people that through different times in their high school career, I assume we're just talking about high school. Right?
Yes, that's what I've said every time.
Different times in your high school career, like, I know people like this. I was kind of an underachiever the whole way through high school. But there were people I knew that did fantastic. Their freshman year, their sophomore year, did okay their junior year, and then their senior year, they were shit, right? And when people looked at their record, a lot of emphasis was put on there was a downward trend, right? So it wasn't just the cumulative GPA. It was, what have you done lately and what was the trend in the direction? So, for example, if you're applying for a college, it's not just your cumulative GPA, but it's how you're trending, how your final years were, etc., right? So you won't get an accurate picture because what would happen would be this person, let's say that they kept a 3.0 the whole time, but at school one, that was unfairly deflated to a 2.0. So in school two, when he gets to the senior year, in reality, he should have a 3.0, but now it's a 4.0, right? That changes the trajectory of how things look, and it changes the accurate depiction so that people that are trying to use that information, whether it be a college or a place of work, now has an inaccurate picture, even though the cumulative.
That's fair, Rob.
Might be the same.
I'll give you that. So the trajectory would be inaccurate. It wouldn't be perfectly accurate. It would only be off by 0.5. But hold on. But with the cumulative average, would that be accurate now?
Well, if you hypothetically could, so I'll try to be as honest as possible. If hypothetically you could find the exact deficit of GPA that was
we already identified it. It was 0.5. We already identified it in this example. I've done it over and over again.
Right, like, so you could say this about anything. If you were supposed to get 12 eggs at the grocery...
Wait, give me an answer. I need an answer to this specific thing.
I said that the average cumulatively would look like it should have been otherwise. But it's irrelevant, like...
Okay.
There's all sorts of reasons. We went through the trajectory reason. There's another reason, right? Because you, whether you like it or not, are in some sort of competition with your peers, right? For example, how high you grade in your class. If you're valedictorian, even if your GPA is lower than this other school, being valedictorian matters because the challenges that you faced at that school, maybe it was just a more difficult school, you were at the top of that class. So you are going to look like your senior year. There was a bunch of your peers that won't be getting that 0.5 increase that now will look like they did poor in comparison to you because you got that increase that you didn't deserve. So you're looking at it like, I'll concede that your metric of, but wouldn't the average out to the same? Yes, but there are all sorts of problems that you're not looking at. And I don't think that average is the sole thing we should be looking for.
I totally agree with you. The thing is, it's so crazy because you're getting really, really lost, like trying to, you keep trying to extricate like the example to like broader examples. So you're like arguing those things, right? And that's not, all I was trying to do was just establish a very, very base principle. And then, because that hasn't happened yet, but all I was trying to do is establish the base principle that that something used to offset a disadvantage is not favoritism, nor is it racist to the other individuals who didn't get it. So in this case, yes, I would say if we have an annual GPA for like just your senior year for all of the people competing on your senior year alone, yes, it would be disadvantageous to those people if and only if you happen to be at the top of the line such that you were able to like reach valedictorian status or something like that, and then some of the other people would be offset by that. But in general, just as far as a cumulative average, this would have zero disadvantages to anyone else, right? And that would be something that
you just gave the reasons that it would.
Okay, wait.
I gave two. It would have disadvantages.
Well, no, I'm sorry. Like maybe better. Well, I said accumulatively, it would have zero disadvantages to anyone else.
You're looking okay. I'll say in the way that you're trying to say cumulatively, I'll say sure. Now I let you give an example. Will you give me the honor of giving you a hypothetical?
Well, before we do, I just want to make sure that we're crystal clear here because there was a bunch of back and forth. So I just want to make sure we're clear. So you are saying that accumulatively, like for the entire grade point average, in that case, the offset done by that second school accumulatively would have no disadvantages to anyone else. It would be something that was specifically done to that individual and would still not be it would be something to offset the disadvantage. It would not be harmful to anyone else accumulatively, and so it would not be favoritism or racism or favoritism, right?
I don't understand what you're meaning by the word cumulatively. Like you're using it as this magic word. You're saying, well, if your GPA should have been 4.0 and we cheat you on one year and say that it's 3.5, and then the next year we say that in a different school we say it's 4.5, it still averages out to 4.0, right? I'm like, yeah, that's true. It does still average out to 4.0.
Sure, I can explain.
It doesn't harm anyone.
Well, no. The reason why I'm
harm, as I've already articulated.
Sure, I'll explain why I'm saying accumulatively. The reason why I'm saying accumulatively is because obviously, like you pointed out, what I think something that I hadn't really considered, because this is like an example I came up with off the top of my head. You pointed out that on an annual basis, like just for that senior year, then that could really it could be problematic for people if he's like near the valedictorian area, so on and so forth, right? Like, and I concede that. That was I'm not dying on any kind of hill here because it's just like I said, just some random example off the top of my head. But what I'm saying is that just the overall average, the overall GPA, not for that year, but for the total time in high school, that wouldn't disadvantage anyone else, and it wouldn't and even when applying for colleges, if just in the area of accumulation, right, of all 4 years, right, like the average of the all 4 years, that's what I'm saying, accumulatively, right, like that is not going to be problematic. It's not gonna negatively impact anyone else. It wouldn't be favoritism to do that 0.5 advantage either. That's what I'm asking.
I'm trying to interpret you in the way that I think is most accurate, and I will say yes on just that metric that I think is very unimportant, but yes, on that metric of just the average of scores, yes, that average would reflect the accurate average that should have happened.
You think grade point average is unimportant?
if we're only looking at the average, then that is something that particularly just looking at the average, and if we just in a vacuum look, that number 4.0, that if that's what that number would have been otherwise, then yes, that would not necessarily negatively affect the person next to him. But it is almost a meaningless statistic. And the example is so hyper focused in a vacuum that it's designed to make it seem like this is benign and see, we're just making things right, when that's not what's going on. As I've said with the problems and other things, like it will make people in that school that are now not getting not at the top of their class that have been outperformed, it will be unfair to them. It'll make the trending look different, things like that. Those are just two quick examples I can get off the top of my head. But yes, just that cumulative number, you are correct that it would accurately reflect the average.
And it wouldn't harm anyone else. Okay, good. Go ahead and give me your example that you would like to, and I'll engage that one fairly.
Okay, right. So your example, you used individuals. Let's use groups. Let's say that there are individuals that, for whatever reason, doesn't have to be skin color, but there are individuals out there that exist that have been cheated or they have been disadvantaged in some way.
How?
You follow me so far?
Okay,
Doesn't have to be race. I think we both agree that these people exist. And let's say that we then, as a university, say we seek to help disadvantaged people. And so we come up with a criteria and we say, we see on average that people that are under the height of 5'5" tend to be disadvantaged in many things, right? So it doesn't have to be true, but let's just say that's what they come to the conclusion of.
Okay.
Right? So they decide to give everyone that's under 5'5" huge advantages when it comes to admissions into the school. Do you think that's unfair to people that had similar disadvantages but were over 5'5"?
It depends on how exactly they were disadvantaged. If they were disadvantaged in education such that they were not able to achieve, or they didn't have a fair shot at education, then I would say maybe an educational institution offsetting the disadvantages, the unfair, unearned disadvantages by them would make sense. But you've been extremely broad, so I can't really answer this question fairly because I don't know specifically what you're talking about.
Right. Okay. Let's make it less ridiculous. Let's say that we say on average, Black people are disadvantaged when it comes to education.
How?
And so on average, the school...
How are they disadvantaged?
Let's say because they tend to have lower GPAs because the schools they went to tend to have overall lower GPAs than schools around them.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So an average Black person of a GPA might be 2.8, an average of a white person might be 3.0. Mm-hmm. And we think, well, when we look, we can see that most of the average schools that predominantly Black people go to have a slightly lower GPA for the people there. Following me?
Okay.
Okay, so the university says, we will then preference all Black people, right? We'll give them all an advantage.
All Black people that went to this school, that went to the schools that were...
Black people, just Black people.
Okay, so I'm sorry. In your hypothetical, are you saying that all Black people were exclusively in schools that were disadvantaged?
Nope.
Oh, so then yeah, we would have an unfairness there, because if you start advantaging all Black people, even people who weren't necessarily harmed in a specific way, then I would say that it would be problematic. The only way that something, again, because we already discussed in the example I gave you and in our definitions, specifically that any sort of redress needs to be aimed specifically at the individuals who are harmed. In this example, you're talking about people who weren't harmed would qualify, so that doesn't sound like a redress. It sounds like something that's a little bit, I don't know, it isn't a redress.
So I agree with you. And then the next question becomes, whose example, mine or yours, more accurately reflects our university system?
My example wasn't aimed specifically at the university system. My example was only talking about specifically, my point was just to establish that something used to offset a negative deficit isn't favoritism or harmful to other people. That was the purpose. It was a general principle. I wasn't thinking of any specific policy position or anything of the like. I just wanted you to concede, which I'm glad that we were at least on the same page now, that yes, something to offset a disadvantage is not disadvantageous to the people that weren't disadvantaged originally.
But anyone could come up with a hypothetical situation that doesn't reflect reality and say, in this hypothetical situation, can you see how I may have a point? I could do that a million
Of
different
course. Would
ways.
you like me to?
The
Would you like me to? Okay, go
just
ahead.
let me finish.
Go ahead.
Sure. The way we got into this conversation was I was saying I think systemic oppression in these different institutions can affect negatively and positively on all sorts of different categories, such as race, gender, sexual orientation, religion, etc. And you
Mm-hmm.
were like, give me an example. Give me an example of where it would benefit blacks or harm whites. And I was
Sure.
like, okay, like our education system, certainly there are things that you could say are disadvantaged for blacks, but if you have a similar SAT score to a white person and a similar GPA or an Asian person, then the black is preferred by many of our higher institutions. That's what affirmative action did. Your response to that was like, but hypothetically, if we're redressing disadvantages to a specific individual from a specific agency to make sure that their GPA is cumulatively accurate, there's no harm in that. And I'm like, okay, going through those hoops, I can see that. But that doesn't reflect the question that you asked me. Right? The question you asked me was, show me the institution that's doing that. I did. And you even conceded when I gave the example. My example wasn't a hypothetical, by the way. My example is the reality of what goes on in higher ed.
I don't think that that's the reality. First off, we
You don't
recognize.
think affirmative action exists?
Well,
based on
no,
race?
I'm sorry, that wasn't what I was going to say. I'll finish the statement I was originally saying.
Okay.
I don't think that that's the reality. I think that affirmative action, actually, the largest recipient of affirmative action is white women. So then if we're going to sit here and try to look at affirmative action itself, specifically as something that's harmful to white people, yet white women are the largest recipient of affirmative action, I don't know what we're talking about here. Thank you for Googling it for me. I don't want to look it up, but you got it. I see you searching. Thank you.
Well, it's like, for example, like, what do you mean? So you're just saying that that white women are because we have feminism has said that we have to prioritize women to give them advantages, and because that advantage happens more. Wait. Actually, let me rephrase this. So your argument is because white women are preferred over black men, then we shouldn't be able to say, well, then whites are actually disenfranchised or it's unfavorable to whites the way affirmative action applies.
I think in many times white women are preferred over black women as well, because what they do is they just qualify as women. And so then the school is able to use their affirmative action quota to be able to say, hey, we're still helping protected and minority classes or protected classes. And in this case, because this person is a woman, then that person should be able to be admitted into our school and fill our quota. And so that quota is predominantly filled by white women in 2021.
Well, we also know that occurs also with blacks when it comes to places that we could see, for example, that the Department of Justice was investigating Yale specifically, that said that Asian Americans were the most. So actually, for white people that want to talk about it, they're the most disenfranchised. It's just not true. Asian Americans are affected most by affirmative action because they tend to have higher GPAs and higher SAT scores. And so when you look at a school like Yale, they say, geez, Asians only make up, I'm just pulling a number out of my ass, but something like 10% of the population, and yet they represent 30% of our student body. So we need to punish Asians by saying you have to have it. We only want the top 10% of Asians, right? And so that means that an Asian's going to have a higher SAT score than a white person, who's also going to have a higher SAT score than a black person. That's the reality. We can see that in Ivy League schools and places all over the place. I can even see that at my school that I graduated, State School Clarion University.
Well, this is a different conversation. You said specifically, okay, I'm not debating whether or not it's true. I've never seen the numbers, but even if it were true, this has nothing to do with the original argument and the original question, which you were attempting to answer. So don't move the goalpost to Asian people, because originally I was asking you specifically about which systems were negatively impactful or were racist against white people. And the thing that you brought forward was education, which you were talking about affirmative action, and which white women, which you're saying affirmative action is the thing that is racist towards white people, yet the largest benefactor of affirmative action is white women. So then I'm still asking you, because clearly affirmative action isn't one, what is a system that is harmful or racist towards white people?
No, first off, I don't see any proof. Like, I know you're asserting.
I can Google it if you need. You're Googling it now. I can Google it for you as well.
Right. So even if white women were true, black people are prioritized over white people in general. Are you saying that doesn't matter because there's a specific group that happen to be white that are women that are more prioritized? Therefore, we can't say that that's disadvantage towards white people.
I don't know.
Are black people more privileged than white people, white women?
Listen,
when it comes to these systems,
listen. You can say that black people are preferred or privileged or whatever over white people, but it doesn't seem to be the case when the outcome is that white women are the largest recipient of affirmative action benefits.
So how's that work? How's white women get the affirmative action? They add points to their GPA. They add points to their SAT scores. That's what they do.
I listen. I didn't come here prepared to know exactly how the system. Wait, hold on. I didn't come here prepared specifically to tell you exactly what exact metrics they use when using affirmative action or assessing things in that way. I don't know the exact intricacies of exactly how the system works. But what I can say is that the outcome has been that white women are the largest recipient of affirmative action benefits. Now, I don't know. Now, you can say black people are prioritized. I
got to take this call real quick.
Gotcha.
Right, I'm so sorry.
No problem. So yes, there are specific measures within affirmative action meant to offset some of the negative harm by our education system against black people. There are specific measures in affirmative action meant to do that. However, if the biggest recipient of affirmative action is white women, then it seems like those measures aren't as harmful to white people as you're saying, considering the fact that there are also simultaneously measures meant at aiming women and white women are claiming them, right? So in order for you to be able to say that this thing is so harmful to white people, you would have to be able to quantify it. And the only numbers that I have are the numbers that say, like you're saying, affirmative action is harmful to white people, and I'm saying the largest beneficiary of affirmative action is white women. These two statements seem extremely contradictory to me. Okay. If you disagree with that, I think what we should do is we should table the conversation. I got you. Well, I was going to say what I think we should do is I got you. You can ask your last question. We should table the conversation and we can resume it at another day. And I will study affirmative action specifically, and then I will have direct answers and towards so that we have actual numbers as opposed to you just saying, hey, here's a measure that seems harmful when we know that the biggest recipient of it is white women.
Okay, so then what if I said that white men are the most disenfranchised by this?
That might be true. That sounds like they probably is true.
Is that an example that proves oppression against white men?
Sure, I would say that affirmative. Well, hold on. No. Actually, again, I would need the actual numbers to prove that it's oppressive towards white men. Because what it sounds to me is like, again, this is a measure that's used to offset a disadvantage, and as we established, and you agreed to earlier on in the conversation, that a measure used to offset disadvantages is not necessarily harmful to is not necessarily harmful to others. So in this case, if this is just something that's used to offset. I think that's what affirmative action is.
You've conceded that point already. Remember my hypothetical that was actually just the reality of what affirmative action is? I said that if we prioritized a whole group, but some of the people in that group didn't suffer the disadvantages that people on average in the group suffer, would you say that that's undue favoritism and disadvantageous towards other people? You said yes, because not everyone of that group experienced those disadvantages. And so if white men are the losers in this situation, we already know that not all women or all black people are disadvantaged. And so to prioritize them based on that gender or race category is giving advantages to a group of people that aren't all disadvantaged.
But you don't have any numbers, right? Like, and that's why I can't really.
What are you talking about?
You would need to tell me. I'm going to tell you what I'm talking about. You would need some sort of numbers to be able to detail what percentage of these people who weren't actually harmed by the system are receiving these benefits. For example, if we find out that 95% of the people, 95% of the black people who are receiving affirmative action benefits are people who came from these schools, and only 5% are people who never went to any underfunded or under whatever disadvantaged schools, then it's like, okay, so it sounds like there's a tiny element of people who are receiving benefits that wouldn't have qualified otherwise, right? And so I would need to know. Just saying, you just created a hypothetical of a system, and I agreed with the hypothetical that in general, making something so vague and so inclusive that people that weren't disadvantaged would receive benefits sounds problematic to me. Like, I don't know that applies directly to this.
Why do I need specific numbers when you've made the following concessions? Yes, giving entire groups of people sort of advantages is wrong because not everyone in that group will have been disadvantaged. They don't all live the same lifestyle. And
you're stating that wrongly.
Please. And you've also conceded that, yes, you acknowledge that they do prioritize black students by giving them increased points, affirmative action points on SAT and other adversity score. You've already conceded that happens. So what does it matter how many people take advantage of that? If you are one of the black students that want to take advantage of that, or one of the female students that want to take advantage of that, it is at that institution is prioritizing you. and being advantageous to you based on metrics that have nothing to do with whether or not you were disadvantaged.
Okay, so Rob, here, let me just ask you a question really quick. If we found out that that system was in play exactly as it is, and we found out that only one black person in the entirety of the year received that benefit, yet all of the other portions of that affirmative action system were still in place as well, and then we found out that, I don't know, 100,000 non-black people were receiving the other benefits of affirmative action, be it for sexual orientation or gender or religion or any of the other thing, then you would probably then at that point say that this thing is not necessarily, or is not largely harmful to white people, right? You need the numbers. Without numbers, you're saying, hey, here's something that seems like it could be harmful, and you have no numbers to support it. Whereas I'm saying, well, we know that it's not harmful to white women. It's not harmful to white people overall because white women are the biggest benefactors of affirmative action, right? So again, without numbers, your claim is meaningless.
No, it's not meaningless, even in that situation. So notice that I keep coming up with, quote, hypotheticals and situations that are a pretty damn close, accurate reflection of reality. And you keep coming up with hypotheticals that are so nonsensical and so...
What hypotheticals have I come up with?
Like, for example, if the hypothetical, if we're just looking at the term cumulative average, we don't look at the reality.
Wait.
Of giving one school...
Rob, that hypothetical had nothing to do with affirmative action. It had nothing to do with affirmative action. We weren't talking about affirmative action at the time that I did that. That was just a random hypothetical.
It doesn't matter if
right. Okay, go ahead. But I'm just going to ignore this point.
You took a situation that was so in a vacuum and so like very specific to one thing that's not important, just so you could get me to say, like, I guess in this very unique situation that we have no evidence that has occurred, in this very unique situation, if we only look at the measure of cumulative average, yes, I guess you're right in that sense. Here you're saying, oh, well, affirmative action, even though you've already made the concessions, now you're backing out saying, well, what about hypothetically, if only one person was advantaged, only one out of the whole system, so 99.9% of all blacks that benefit from this, they actually were disadvantaged in the exact way that we're saying, but that one person wasn't. Well, then you would surely say, in that hypothetical, no, you've already conceded that you understand that they do, that we can go back and look at the VOD. You said that if we had a system that just took a whole category of people like black people and said we are going to try to give them advantages because they've been disadvantaged, that would be wrong. That's what you said. And then when I point out that's what's happening and you admit that's what's happening, you say, well, if we do this other hypothetical, no. Do you think, I'll just ask you point blank, are you changing your answer now? Do you think that having affirmative action based on race is a good thing?
It depends on specifically what system and exactly how it's implemented. Again, I don't know the very specifics of affirmative action enough. Again, I didn't come here specifically with the intention of debating affirmative action, which is why I said we should table this conversation. You're saying I conceded to things in hypotheticals and then trying to say that those hypotheticals directly apply towards affirmative action. I don't know that to be the case, especially when we have the data that clearly suggests that the largest recipients of affirmative action are white women. So that's why I suggested multiple times now, and I'll do so again here, we table this conversation and we can resume it another time after I've actually done research specifically on affirmative action, and then we can have the actual data as opposed to you posturing at me without any actual numbers to support what you're talking about a system that you don't know all of the specifics of, clearly as demonstrated by the fact that you didn't know that the largest recipient of affirmative action was white women. So we can table this conversation and then we can both get all of the information necessary to have an intricate conversation about affirmative action. Do you think that would make a little bit more sense?
We could get off the topic of affirmative action, but let me say something in specific here. Like, oftentimes people could have discussions based on ideology or philosophical principles that you don't need exact percentages, data, and things like that to have the philosophical and ideological stances that you take be interrogated by people that are making similar arguments. If you say that throughout the course of our conversation of systemic racism and systemic oppression, unless we have specific data in the exact specific ways that things are applied all around, that we have to table the conversations, there'll be very little we could talk about. That's why we focus on just saying, okay, hypothetically, do you think that we should advantage an entire group of people? Your entire hypothetical to me at first that we started off with was completely hypothetical. It was a completely made up situation that continued to get more and more in a vacuum. No, we're just talking cumulative, blah, blah, blah. You didn't have specific data. Like, I could have copped out in that and said, well, I can't answer. Let's table this. I need specific data on how many schools have screwed over an individual. Then they went to another school and that school decided to benefit them. You would say, that's fucking ridiculous, Rob. You're just talking about abstract abstract, whether or not you think this hypothetical should be, but please let me finish, whether or not you think that you can engage in this hypothetical. Then when I in turn do the same thing to you, you say, well, now we need to have the exact specific data of exactly. Now you've conceded the important points. You've conceded that if there was a system that advantaged people based purely on an immutable characteristic like race, because they said they were all disadvantaged, that would be wrong because clearly they're not all disadvantaged. And you've conceded that that actually does happen because they give increased SAT scores and things like that based on things like race. So you've conceded that the status quo does in fact do the very thing that you criticize. When that's brought up to you, you say, well, now I need the specific data. So I'm sticking by, when you asked me a hypothetical, I gave an answer and I've stuck by that answer. You are not doing that. You are copying out of the answer you gave. But I'm more than willing to move on from the discussion of affirmative action if you like.
Okay, just to be clear, you only start needing data when you want to focus on the application of a principle that someone's talking about. When you're just trying to get an idea of someone's belief or something, you wouldn't need data for that. So I created a hypothetical, and my hypothetical wasn't applied to any actual system in place now. It was only just to establish the principle, which you agreed to, that clearly doing something to advantage someone that had been previously disadvantaged isn't necessarily harmful to other people. We could have then started applying that to other people, and I intended to do so, not through affirmative action, because that's not the system that I'm particularly informed on. But the whole purpose was just to establish a principle, so you don't need any data or anything when you're talking about a principle. Now, if I want to start applying that principle and saying this is how we should use it, then I would need data to be able to justify the application. And in this case, when it comes to affirmative action, you would need some sort of data in order to justify the application of the principle that you somehow believe that I conceded to. So yes, we can easily move on here.
I'll just say real quick, and then you go. That's exactly what I was doing, was talking about the principle. We weren't talking about application. We were talking about.
Yes, you were applying the principle to affirmative action.
No. We were playing. The principle of affirmative action is what I was asking you about. You said that it was a bad idea.
No, you didn't.
Conceded that it is applied in real life. It's very pathetic. It's pathetic that I walked you through exactly what affirmative action is, that it gives people benefit based on perceived disadvantaged classes like skin color. You said that would be bad, and I said, well, don't they do that with black people? And you're like, yeah, they do. And then when I'm like, okay, so your principle is you should be against that. That's all I'm saying. It doesn't matter how many people take advantage of it. In principle, you said that we shouldn't advantage entire groups of people based on things like race.
I didn't say that.
Then what did you say? I said, I was very specific when I asked you the question. I said, let's say that we prioritized and gave advantages to people, all black people, for example. Do you think that would be a favoritism towards them? Do you think that would be a problem? You said, yeah, that would be favoritism. That would be a problem. That's what you said.
No, because within that thing, you're leaving out the context of you specifically detailed that only a select group of the black people were disadvantaged. And so then you said, now, if we only a select group of black people were disadvantaged, then should we be applying affirmative action just broadly based on race? And my answer to that was no. However, I would, especially when you're saying that there are a group of black people outside of the select group that are not disadvantaged, that weren't disadvantaged. Now, just because someone succeeded despite the disadvantages of a system doesn't mean that they weren't disadvantaged. It just means they worked harder and to still achieve results. So in this specific case, I'm going to finish. Specifically in this case, when you were giving me that broad hypothetical, I was focused on that hypothetical. I'm not sure that it applies to affirmative action, and you have no data to actually suggest that. I don't know why. Look, it's really simple. I will go ahead and let you get the last word if need be, but it seems like now this is probably the fourth time that I've asked us to move on to affirmative action. I haven't restated my claims or tried to re-deliver my argument. You've had the last word God knows how many different times. I don't know why you're so insistent on staying on this specific topic when I've already conceded a billion times. You don't have data, and neither do I, so I don't know how we can have the conversation.
It's not a question of data. It's a question of principle.
And I disagree there.
It's important for two reasons. One, it's important in this specific context because you have conceded that, now you're hinging on, you're adding a bunch of things that you didn't say in your original statement that you're now saying. And so the implication is this. Now you're saying, well, theoretically, it could be okay. It could be okay to give every black person an advantage because theoretically, I would have to prove that every black person hasn't had a disadvantage. Now, me and you know that's not true. Not every black person's been disadvantaged in life. Or do you think they have?
All right, so we're done with that one. You want to move on to the next topic? I've given you the last word.
And then I'll finish this point, and then we can move on. And the second reason that's important is because it's impossible to have a good faith conversation with someone who's going to backtrack things that they're saying on their principle once they find out that it hurts them in their argument that they're having. So this will occur as we watch. This will occur over and over. I'll get him to admit something. He'll then say, "Oh, it doesn't apply to the specific thing you're talking about."
Yo, here goes posturing Rob. He loves doing that. Okay, thanks. All right, so what else did you want to talk about?
Okay, so we're talking the law enforcement system. That was another area that you talked about, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we started this conversation. So you think that the law enforcement system is negative because you think that it's systemically racist against Black people?
Sure. So then, there's been Department of Justice investigation into individual police departments that have clearly detailed that that these things are that police departments are racist against Black people. We've seen several consent decrees and things like that have happened in various places like Los Angeles. The Ramparts division was completely infiltrated by white supremacists, and there was insane amounts of racism that was carried out within them. And so then they ended up being there was a huge sting operation for them, which they determined there was all sorts of racism happening there. And I mean, I don't know. The list goes on, right? There's been so many investigations, what do they call them? Pattern and practice investigations in the individual police departments that have clearly demonstrated that. And then specifically, one of the functions of police officers is when it comes to traffic stops, the largest study of its kind, the Nature study, clearly detailed that there was some sort of racism when it came to traffic stops by police officers. Yeah, and then of course, obviously, I would say what flows downstream from these police interactions is the criminal justice system, in which is the thing that enforces whatever the outcomes are from these traffic stops and these interactions with the police. And we've seen within those cases that clearly there is disparate sentencing that is racially harmful towards Black people.
Okay, so I sent you a link. We can talk about all of those things specifically. That's fine. We can get to that. But the link I sent you. If you're a criminal defendant, it may help a lot to be a woman. At least that's what Professor Sonia Starr on federal criminal cases suggests. Starr's recent paper, Estimating Gender Disparity in Federal Criminal Cases, looks closely at the largest data set of federal cases and reveals some significant findings. After controlling for the arrest record, criminal history, and other prior characteristics, men receive 63% larger sentences on average than women do. Women are twice as likely to avoid incarceration if convicted. The gender gap is about 6 times larger.
Wait, Rob, can I stop you really quick? Can I stop you? Because I don't need you to read this entire article. You could have just made the point. You're saying that the system
I was just finishing just that paragraph. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Let me finish the end of it.
Seems a little postury to me, but go ahead.
The gender gap is 6 times larger than the racial gap. So therefore, I don't want to hear, just like we couldn't talk about Blacks benefiting from affirmative action because white women benefit more. I don't want to hear about the legal system being unfair to Black people when it's actually women that benefit the most.
Okay. Is there a disparity between white women and Black women when it comes to being recipients of these benefits inside of our criminal justice system?
Is there
I have data. I have data for that. Would you like to see it?
Is there a disparity between white men and Black men when it comes to affirmative action?
I don't know. Do you have any data to support that?
Yes, there is. Again, so the study that I showed you shows that is the case. You said that we weren't even willing to look into that because the reality is white women benefited the most. That's what you said. So in this case, women benefit more than men. So we should be having men lives matter, not Black lives matter.
Okay,
because men are disproportionately affected 6 times worse than the gap between men and women is 6 times worse than the gap between whites and Blacks, which means that why is there a focus that's about race in the criminal justice system when gender is far more important? Now, when it came to affirmative action in schools, you said, we don't even want to talk about it.
I don't want to talk about that anymore, Rob. Please don't keep posturing back to that. Right. Okay, so stop doing that then. If we've tabled that portion of the conversation, if you want a decent and civil conversation, please stop posturing and referencing back to the conversation that we both agreed to table that I let you get the last word on. Please be more decent now. And so let's talk about this thing that you presented to me. Right now we're talking about the criminal justice system. Please don't reference any previous examples in any in the conversation that I allowed you to get the last word on. Now, when it comes to this criminal justice system, if you can show me something, if you can show me,
and then you can talk about the specifics.
Okay.
Allow me to retort. The way conversations work is that people say things and they share their principles and values, and then you understand those principles and values should apply across the board. You don't get to say, oh, the way I argue on one thing totally doesn't apply. My principles and values and style that I argue there doesn't apply when we move on to a different. This has nothing to do with the date of affirmative action. It has to do with with you said that if we see that white women are the beneficiaries the most when it comes to education,
you're doing it again.
It's somehow indicative that there can't be, right? I'm just saying, why wouldn't that apply to the criminal justice system?
Okay, listen, I got it. Here's the deal. If you want to make that argument, then levy that argument without referencing the previous discussion. That's what I'm charging you to do. If you can't be decent and table a conversation that we agreed to table, and you're going to try to smarmily keep on referencing this conversation that I allowed you to get the last word on and asked you over 4 times to end, then it seems like you're not trying to actually approach this conversation in decency. Now, bringing it home, if you like that argument, then please do so and use it in this conversation without referencing something that we already both agreed to tabling, which it seems like you're struggling with now.
It has nothing to do with...
I don't care what it has to do with it. Just don't reference it. We're done with that conversation.
Let me make my point. We could logically intuit that if it is true that men face 63% worse outcomes than women, right? And then what's the number from blacks to whites? I'm still waiting for that. But we could logically intuit if the disparity is so big, and we know that black men receive worse treatment than white men, which is what your argument is, then in order to make up for that percentile difference, it would have to intuit that black women have far less harsh consequences than white men. And it makes sense when we look at the raw data. For example, if you look at the percentage of people that are in prison for more than 10 years that have long sentences, the percentage is overwhelmingly you're more likely to be there as a white man than a black woman, right? The same is true as people that are arrested.
Do you have data to support that? Do you have data for that?
Yes, we could look at the total. What percentage of the total amount of black women are in prison?
What? No. That's not what you would need to do. You wouldn't just look and see what the total number of percentage of people in prison. You would have to look at what the average sentencing is for black women versus white males, and you would need to be able to control and you would need to control specifically for individual crimes to be able to determine, like, oh, okay, because for example, we know that men are hyper overrepresented when it comes to violent crime, and that's why they get longer sentences. This thing that you're referencing here, like, are they controlling for that? Or are they just looking at general at the outcome and saying men are receiving longer sentences than women, and ignoring the fact that men are like super duper highly more representative of violent crime?
Again, read what it said. Looks closely at the data set. After controlling for arrest offenses, criminal history, and other prior characteristics.
Okay, so
control for that.
Wait, where does it say violent crime there? All it's controlling for is criminal history.
Let me repeat what it says. Again, let me repeat. After controlling for arrest offense, criminal history, so the type of crime, the criminal history, and other prior characteristics, men receive 63% longer sentences on average than women do.
Right.
Women are twice as likely to avoid...
This isn't... that. Nothing you mentioned violent crime. So that's what I keep pointing out to you.
Why does it matter?
I'll explain to you why it matters. The reason why it matters is because violent crime is significantly more harshly punished in our criminal justice system. If you do something with violence as opposed to non-violence, they're going to be... I just already stated that. That's why it matters. So, and it turns out that men are significantly more representative of violent crime in this country than women. So then if that's the case, then you would expect these disparities. If they control for violent crime, then you might have a claim that you're actually making. Until then, it sounds like you're just complaining about something that sounds like it makes sense.
Okay, one, it controls for all type of crime, which means that it would intuit that it controls for violent crime as well.
It doesn't say that.
So it's saying that yes, it says it controls for the criminal offense. In other words, so it's looking at women that were charged with speeding, men that were charged with speeding. And then it's comparing women that were charged with murder versus men. That's when it says controlling for the crime.
Okay, do you have access to this study to be able to demonstrate that? Like, cause I need a study that you're talking about.
I provided the link to the study to you. Next, would you
this is an article, this isn't a study. Where's the study? You said I'm asking you for the study.
It is linked within.
Where?
You can click into the study is linked within. Second.
Where? I don't see it. I'm asking you for the study so I can read it while you're talking. Give me the study.
You're fucking ridiculous.
Okay, thank you.
You could have clicked that the hyperlink was there, but you chose not to. Okay? You chose not to click it.
Sure. I didn't know where it was. You just gave me this article. This article is long. I didn't know where it is. I was asking for it over and over again. It's not that hard.
I clicked the hyperlink, so we're good. So there you go. Nextly. Now let's go to the United States Sentencing Commission. I'll put that link to you. I'll put the link right there for you. Okay? The link's going to be right there. You got it? If you need me to, I could click on it on my screen and put it up if you can't figure out how to click on the screen. Here's what it says. Quote, female offenders of all races receive shorter sentences than white male offenders. during the post-report period as they had for the prior 4 periods. You get that? So women of all races.
Wait, where are you reading that?
Shorter sentences than white males.
Where are you reading that?
Yeah, that's linked from the United States Sentencing Commission.
What you say? It's linked.
Yes, it's linked in me and yours private conversation.
Okay, which one? The third link or the second one?
It's the one that says demographic differences in
there we go. Okay.
www.uc.
Rob, listen, you can call me ridiculous all you want to. It's really simple. When you're reading these things, I want to be able to read them. It helps me to be able to comprehend them better, and whatever. That's all I'm asking you for. Yes, I can click a hyperlink. I didn't know which link it was. There were multiple hyperlinks within this article. You just presented it to me right now. I didn't know exactly what you were reading. I was asking you for it. You're familiar with it. Rather than me trying to read through an entire document and not being able to listen to you, I need you to provide it for me. It's that simple. Jesus. Now, it's really simple. If I'm asking you for something, I'm going to let you talk. While you're talking, I want to at least have the link so at least I can start looking for it. That's all I'm asking for. Jesus.
Were you looking? Whatever. It's a stupid point. Great. You got the links. And now what do you say?
Okay, so I don't know. Looking at this link there, it says key findings right here. Black male offenders continue to receive longer. This is key findings number 1. Black male offenders continue to receive longer sentences than similarly situated white male offenders. Black male offenders receive sentences on average 19.1% longer than similarly situated white male offenders during the post-report period from 2012 to 2016. Where's the female offenders of all race receive shorter sentences than white male offenders during the post-report period as they had for the prior 4 periods. The differences in sentence length decreased slightly during the 5-year period after the 2012 Booker report for most offenders. The differences in sentence length fluctuated across all time periods studied for white females, black females, Hispanic females, and other race female offenders. Do you know what the difference is between black females and white males?
Well, it said it was different. Do you want to go through the specific? So now we need the exact number. That's what you want.
It's not. No. It's not. It's not just that. It's not that. It's not that we just need it's not that we need just the exact numbers. Oh, the numbers here, right here, by the way. It says 19.1%. The thing is, I need to know exactly, specifically, like what the difference is between black males and white females. We have the number here for males, right? Black males for
white. So you're acknowledging, you accept the fact that black females get lighter sentences than white males, correct?
Yes, I do.
So, okay.
I don't know what percentage difference.
So we cross that bridge. So then it seems that your characterization where you said clearly it seems like race is the predominant factor is wrong. Clearly it seems like gender is the predominant factor, correct?
Well, hold on, though. It depends, because I don't know if I don't know if they're controlling specifically for violent crime or whatever. All this thing seems like it's doing is just talking about just the differences in average sentencing. I don't know if it's controlling for any of those things. Is it controlling for violence and crime? Because again,
yes, that's what the study.
Where does it say that? I'm looking at this. I'm looking at the key findings. I'm asking where does it say that? I don't know that. It said, look, this new time period from is referred to as a post-report. Okay. Also, the commission has collected data from an additional variable, violence in an offender's criminal history, that the commission had previously noted was missing from its analysis, but that might help explain some of the differences in sentences noted in its works. This report represents the results observed from adding the new data to the commission's analysis. So it seems like I would assume.
I just want to point out, if I can, so far you have provided zero evidence. You keep talking about the data and you need to interrogate it. You've provided not one study, not one report.
You haven't asked me for any.
Every time I provide something, even if it's from an official governmental source, you say, but wait a minute. This says what I didn't think it would say. So now I need to know the specific. How was it done? Did it control X and Y? I'll ask you that. So I ask you the same.
No. Don't mischaracterize me that way. Hold on. No. Before you move on, let me make sure you just mischaracterized me. Previously, when you asked me I let you interject previously. So are you going to let me interject now? I let you do it previously. Okay, thank you. I know. I get you. Yeah, you can say whatever you need to. Go ahead and let me finish. Let me finish talking, please, really quickly. I know. Thank you for the permission. I really appreciate it. Now, I haven't asked, you haven't, the reason why I haven't been providing studies is because I haven't really been making an argument. What I've really been doing is continuing with your argument. And so I needed studies from you, specifically when it comes to like the difference in male sentences or whatever. I didn't make a definitive claim on anything yet. What you have been doing is...
Your entire opening statement was definitive.
What was my definitive claim?
You made a bunch of definitive claims.
What was it?
About how studies show. Let me finish. You said studies show that blacks receive longer sentences and that they're incarcerated more and they're charged for. Didn't you say all that?
Oh, sure. Wait, hold on.
Oh, those were definitive statements.
Yes. That's a definitive statement. Okay. Did you disagree with it?
Well, I didn't. We started talking about different things. I asked you.
Oh, that's why I didn't need a study for it. I wouldn't think that I need to provide a study for something you agreed to.
Finish.
Go ahead.
I did not take a stance that I agreed or disagreed. What I did do was ask you for specific data points in it, which you were unable to provide anything.
Wait,
for example, I said, I said quite clearly, what is the difference in incarceration lengths between whites and blacks? What percentage is different? You were unable to provide any evidence of that.
Could we continue on in the conversation and I stopped looking? Right here, we're looking at something that says 19.1%. I have a bunch of studies on it. I can go through them. Huh?
Okay.
Sure.
Okay, so go ahead. Let's go.
I can find God knows how many different studies. I have like a whole. Rolls Wrist is amazing, and he has an entire thing.
Go ahead. Let's hear the first study.
So, okay, here he goes. U.S. Sentencing Commission. Oh my God. Is this the same thing? It might be. This I can just give you an entire document. I just use.
No, wait a minute. No. Real quick.
Here it is.
Is one of the sources? Please. Is one of the sources you're about to cite the same thing that I sent you?
It could be. Yeah.
No, that's one of the ones you have ready.
Sure. Here, I'll just give you my entire.
Okay, now, if I can, for a second.
Okay.
I let you interject. So this is what just happened. You are interrogating my source for the claims that I'm making, and yet this is a source that you use.
I'm not positive. I'm not sure.
The claims you were making.
I'm not sure.
When you wanted to use that source to back up your claims, you were okay with it. You didn't say, well, some of these studies I have no idea how they came to these conclusions. I don't know if they were just comparing violent. You didn't say that. You just said definitively, studies show X. And then as soon as I use some of the same studies to show, but actually, when white men still have it worse than women of color, you're like, well, no. Now we need to interrogate this source.
I didn't disagree with it. I didn't disagree with that.
Cool.
Hold on. No. Stop mischaracterizing it. See, you're getting so caught up in your emotions that you're posturing and you're mischaracterizing things. I read number 4 in the key findings from the article that you listed, right? And that thing clearly says female offenders of all races receive shorter sentences than white males offenders during the post-report period as they had for the prior 4 periods. And then I immediately, readily accepted this point. Okay, so it does seem like females of all races receive longer sentences than white males. That was perfectly fine. And then all I did was ask you, do you know what the difference is, right? Because I don't know what the difference is in percentage, right? Maybe black females receive 5% lower sentence than white males. Maybe it's 10%. Maybe it's 50. I don't know. All I was doing was asking you a question. And if you didn't have that number, you could easily say, I don't know that number. It wasn't like I was making some grand point or trying to use that to further some other position I had. I readily accepted this as soon as I read it. And I didn't need to, and I didn't try to interrogate this thing and try to disprove it or dismantle it at all. All I asked for was specificity. So you're mischaracterizing the entire thing. You're really caught up in your emotions, bro.
Again, you rewrite history again. What you said was, well, it depends. That's what you said. I said, so are you willing to concede that actually this clearly shows that gender is the predominant factor when it comes to disparities, not race? You said, well, it depends.
Right. So depends. Yes, because I did say that because once you start trying to broaden the thing, right? Once you start trying to broaden it, then now we need to know the actual numbers, right? So yes, maybe we can say that black females receive 5% shorter sentences than white males, right? That could be the case. And white women only receive a 3% difference, but then we find out that black men receive a 20% longer sentence than white males, right? So then we don't know which one is which one has a larger impact. Which, like, for you to make the broader statement, you do need more specificity. All I can give you,
it doesn't matter.
I don't think you know how numbers work, bro. This is crazy.
I do. Let me explain how numbers work. So we know in totality, you're not conceding that men have it worse compared to women than blacks have it to white, correct?
Wait, men have it worse than women than blacks have it to white? I don't know.
Men have it worse. We do know. You've conceded that point already. That the average sentencing differential between men and women is 63%, and the average sentencing disparity between blacks and whites is far less than that.
Okay,
you conceded that point.
So the average. Okay, can you show me, like, from the Department of Justice thing where it says that regarding the 63%? Because I don't have that.
Again, I showed you a different study that made that argument, which you asked for several times, which I presented. I could read its findings again. That says the disparity between, it says men receive 63% longer sentences on average than women do. The gender gap is 6 times as large as the racial disparity, which you conceded.
Yeah, so I don't know if that's a different study or whatever, but it sounds like if that number is accurate, if it's true that men receive 60% longer sentences than women, then I but again, hold on, wait. But if you're using 2 different studies here, and one of these studies is talking about, like, if If this study doesn't include some of the same factors and data in the other studies, then this thing could be really bad, right? For example, maybe the first one that's talking about the 60% doesn't control for violent crime and things like that. If that's okay, well, you didn't. I did. You didn't. You didn't.
Said exactly
I'm sorry. Okay, I got you.
Repeat it for the 5th time. It says controlling for the arrest offense, criminal history, and other prior characteristics.
So I don't know that means that they're controlling for violence. I don't know that they're that. Wait, what? No, I was talking. I don't know.
Yes, you keep rambling on because you interjected again.
Rob, you've overtalked me so much more in this conversation. You've definitely taken up way more speaking time than I have thus far. Just please let me finish the point really quickly. I'm positive of that. Anyway, so the point is, you can't just combine studies in this way, right? If one study is controlling for one thing and another study is not controlling for the other thing, then that doesn't have then those two different things. I'm sorry, I got distracted. I was reading my Discord. You can't use the data from one study and then try to just compare those numbers immediately to a second study, because they might be having different factors. They could have different data. They could just be controlling for different things. And so while that one claim might make that statement, you can't. That's all I'm saying. You just can't compare those two. I'm getting caught up in my words now. I'm getting frustrated.
My point after you rambled on and needlessly there. So
sure.
If we concede that, as you did, that disparity exists, this is what you say. You say, well, even if that's true, it might not be that gender is the prevailing factor, because it could be that black women actually have it worse than white men. So if that's the case, only if that's the case, because we already know that men have it worse than women to a higher degree than blacks have it to whites. So the only way that you give a caveat is, well, if black women have it worse than white men. But they don't. It doesn't matter.
That was my initial caveat.
Because,
yeah.
Right. But you've conceded they don't.
Right.
You conceded that, yes, actually, okay. So then now you concede that the prevailing factor is sex and not race, correct?
Well, again, I never said only if black women, whatever. What I did say is I was saying that I don't know that this number is enough to prove that this thing is larger, because we don't know if black women have it worse than white men. And also we don't know the percentages. So for example, again, if the disparity between black women and white men is only 3%, then or 3%, or what? We need, oh my God, I've said this point so many times, I don't know how else to say it. We need specifics in order to determine which one of these things is a larger factor. But I'm glad that you're willing to use this data. You're also willing to concede then, given your own data, the own studies that you've supported, that you've given me, that yes, that the difference in disparity between black men, that black men are encountering systemic oppression within the system. So while you do agree that the system is oppressive towards men in general, you also agree that black men are even more oppressed than white men within the system, right?
We're talking about specifically what is the primary.
Can you answer the question? Can you answer my question?
I will not answer your question until we finish. We will table that for a second. Right?
Wait, no. I've answered all the questions that you've given me thus far. You're not going to just dodge this question. Every time I've asked you a question, every time you've asked me a question, Rob, I've answered it. We're not tabling that. Every time I've answered, every time you've asked me a question, I've answered it. So now I'm asking you a question, and you're going to answer it. Will you concede that black men are? Okay. Will you concede?
Yeah, go ahead. I'll answer.
Will you concede that black men are disproportionately more harmed by the criminal justice system than white men?
It depends on a bunch of mitigating factors. Like, we don't know if it's controlling with violent crime and things like that. And we don't know specifically how black women stack up to white men and how white women stack up to black men and things like that. So based on a bunch of mitigating factors, we'd have to look into that. Do you know what the percentage, do you know if they're exactly controlling for violent crime?
Okay, so Rob, I'm using the very study that you gave me. And in the study, do you accept the findings of the study that you linked me?
So again, if you'll let me give you an answer now, I'm just
no.
That's how you answer questions.
Okay.
That's how you answer questions. So
listen, I don't care about the posturing. Actually, I honestly answer the question now. Then
I will accept this study. I will accept that this study does show that there are disparities between the sentencing record of whites and blacks. Now, the degree of that disparity is far lower than the degree it shows. For example, let's take the year. Excuse me. Let's take the year. What year is this? For the year 2012, for example, if you look at figure 4, differences within ranges of sentencing of male offenders based on the 4 measures, it averages out to about 7%, 6%. So blacks are about, so it says, according to the one report they used, the Kuhn report, it was 3.8. According to the Protect report, it was 3.5 disparity. According to the Booker report, it was 6.6. According to the Gall report, it was 12.12.
Wait,
according
Rob.
to the Post report, it was 7.9. Correct?
Wait,
seeing these numbers?
Wait, what about the study you gave me? The study you gave me just broadly said 19.1%, right?
I'm literally reading from the specifics of the figures presented in this study. Right? Page 10 of the very study that we're talking about.
Wait, you click full report? Is that what you clicked?
So when you click, yes, full report. So if you go to page 10 and you look at differences within range of sentencing for male offenders.
Okay.
In these post periods, we can see that if you take the average, that's about 6.6%. It will say 7%. Then you go over and it gives the difference between black female and white male. What are the differences? 13.5, 29.7, 24.1.
Wait, Rob, wait, stop. Wait, so look, on your data set, like it seemed like it's actually this is really good. It seemed like it's been shortening. But it seems like for a large portion in time, if we go back to 2014, it looks like it was 60 to around 80, right? It looks like it could be around, it was close to 60 to around 80. So there was about a 20-year average sentencing gap for blacks.
That's months, not years.
Okay. Yeah.
Look at, I could show the number.
Yeah.
Right?
So about 8 years
60,
different.
Real quick, may I? You see the number 60 and 80s listed there. It looks, if you're being generous, or if you're trying to be accurate, black males, it looks like they're receiving, the average sentence was probably close to 74. Does that seem accurate?
Okay, hold on.
Below 80.
Well, look, it doesn't matter if it's years or months. The fact is that constitutes about 20% longer, right?
No.
I'm sorry. No. I'm sorry. 33% longer. 60 to 80 is 33%, right?
Is that what the number shows? 60 to 80? Are you really? Do I really have to pull this up to show?
For 2014?
24. Yes. Do I really have to pull this up to show everyone? Because I will if you want.
It's close to. It's like 78, right?
It's okay. We'll pull it up.
For 2014.
These are the numbers that he's talking about. So do you see where it says 80 here? And you can see that that says 60. So right here in half would be close to 70. I will say that
70.
It looks like it's. Yes,
Rob.
Between 60.
Oh, let me pull. I got you. Since you're posturing, let me do it to my audience too. You 2014. This is the thing I'm talking about. 60 to about 80. What are you talking about, bro?
Because you're not listening to me.
You're lying.
And said halfway between 60 and 80 is 70. Then you cut me off before I could finish where I was going to say, you can clearly see with black male, it's above 70, but it's below 80. It looks like it's about at 75. If you look at the
75?
Clearly, yes.
Rob, are we looking at the same thing? Maybe. Okay, I'm sorry. No, we must have missed. Can I zoom in on it? Can I zoom in on this? Okay. For the year 2014, this is a 60.
Oh, you're saying, I'm sorry. I thought you were going to 2016. I thought you said. So if we look at 2016.
No. You just got all out of freaking pocket because you are so insistent on making your stupid points that you're not listening at all in the conversation thus far. I must have said 2014 about 3 or 4 times. Now, instead of getting indignant and telling me to shut up in the middle of a conversation, how about you check your emotions and table that for a little bit so we can actually have a conversation? Because I've said that. I've said that multiple times thus far. Now, and I said now for 2014, it looked like the gap was about 33% or close to it, right?
Okay, so you said that it looked like that blacks on 2014 were at 80%. And whites were at 60. That's what you said.
No, not 80%. 80.
I
said
80.
The word. Listen, the word. Yeah. Rob, relax a little bit. What I'm saying is, I said the numbers were about 60 and 80. So 60 to 80 is 30. It is 60 to 80 is 33%. Now, what I will say, it's not exactly 80. It looks like it's close to around 78. It looks like it's close to about 78. But
cool. Now, if you'll allow me to finish my point. So one.
Okay, as long as you got the accurate data that we're looking at now.
Right, I didn't say it's not accurate, but you specifically chose a year that wasn't the most recent. You can see that those numbers are getting closer every year.
Yes.
So instead of taking the most recent data we have available, you went back. Then instead of saying 78, you said 80, right? So the reason that I thought you were so wrong was because I assumed you were using the most recent data that we had, and you said 2016, right? Why would you? Why not just go back to 1999?
I can't remember which one it was. So.
We went with your point.
I'm trying to get to this thing right.
Gone through this, and we can see that when looking through this period, we can see that based on these graphs in Figure 4, we can see on average it's being generous about 7 to 7.5% sentencing disparities between black males and white males. Yet around the same time, it's about 25% difference between black females and white males. Do you concede that this finally puts the nail in the coffin that gender is a bigger priority when it comes to disadvantages than race?
Wait, hold on. I'm sorry. I got a little lost there because I was trying to fix this thing and I can't get it off of my monitor now.
All right, Figure 4, right? Figures 4 and 5 show differences within the range period offered of male offenders or differences for female offenders to males. When you look at black male to white male, based on the different ranges that they have, it's 3.8, 3.5, 6.6, 12.2, 7.9. That would average out to what, 7.5%, something like that? Then if you go over here to Figure 5 where it says difference between black female versus white male, it's 13.5, 29.7, 24.1, 31.5, and 27.1.
This is on a specific. Is this on a specific year? What I don't understand what exactly you're reading.
It's the ranges, right? It's the ranges that they've done for these specific reports, which I believe the years were the same years that were given in the graph above.
This thing's lost. I can't find it.
I guess I got to reopen it.
The period, the post report.
You're reading on page 10. You're looking at page 10?
So, do you want me to give you the reports?
Wait, were you looking on page 10? Wait, nigga. You just been rambling, bro. I've been trying to fix that. I'm asking you a question. Where are you reading? Dang. You gotta chill out, bro. Like, legit, this is crazy to me. I don't know why you're getting so freaking... Your patties are in a bundle, my nigga. It's really relaxed. Like, just relax. Like, I'm just trying to figure out where you're at. Okay, well then.
You are, don't tell me to chill out.
You're calmer than me. Okay. Well, it's real simple. Okay, I got you. It's fine. Where were you reading, buddy? Hey, buddy, where were you reading? Hey, buddy, where were you reading? Hey, buddy, where were you reading?
Page 10.
That's
Figure
okay.
4 and Figure 5, which I said the whole time. If you would have calmed your emotions and listened, you would have heard that.
I'm on page 10. Are you talking?
Oh, okay. Well, now we have. Wait,
so
hold on.
Just calmed
Wait,
your
no. Rob. You still gotta relax, buddy. Are you talking about?
Dude,
Rob? I need you to chill. I need you to chill. No.
I need you to chill. Yes, very
Okay, all right, got you. Rob, were you talking about like page 4 of the actual report or page 4 of the PDF? I mean, page 10 of the report or page 10 of the PDF? I don't know which one you're talking about. You see how there's two different things?
Of the report.
Okay.
Which I said multiple times.
Well,
now,
it's a PDF and there's different images, and the image for number 10 is different. That's why I was asking.
I don't give a fuck. This is worth this. You then asked what time periods it was over. Then I decided to read those.
So what were you reading again?
That's on page 6. So let me read the time periods. The red marker is going to be through the period of October 1st, 1998 to April 30th, 2003.
I don't know. I don't even know what you're referring to.
From 2003 to 2004. The following is 2000.
Do I just need to read this myself? I don't know what you're talking about. I'm lost. Where are you reading?
Page 6. So, okay, let's start this. Okay, let's talk through this. Do you see page 10 where it shows these graphs? Do you see that?
I do, yeah.
Okay, now do you see that there is different colors on that graph? You understand that?
Okay, yes.
Do you see that it says the names of those? So red is KOON. You see that?
Wait, what's that?
Then the next one says green, protect. Do you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Then the next one says blue, Booker. Do you see that?
Yep.
Now, do you see how those correspond to the sentencing disparities in each of those graph bars?
Sure.
Do you see how the first graph is the discrepancy between black males and white males?
Let me see, black male versus white male. There we go. Yep, I see it.
Do you see to the right side of the page, it says Figure 5, differences within those same ranges of female offenders. Do you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Do you see the second graph there that says black female versus white male?
Let's see. Yep.
Do you see how there's a red block, a green block, a blue block, etc.? Do you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Do you see that those are labeled as the exact same time period code names that the previous graph had?
Yep.
Okay, now, if we go up to page 4, not the or page 6, not the PDF page, but the report page, it says report time periods. Do you see that?
Okay, page
it's
6.
Highlighted in purple and gray on page 6.
Okay,
in the top right corner. Okay, do you notice that the names where it says Coon, Protect, Tucker, Golf, do you notice those names match up with those colored bars?
Absolutely.
Right? Do you notice that those give the exact ranges of these periods?
Yeah. But
so
this is where the problem. Yeah, but this is where the problem comes in, right? Like, because I would probably need to read through this thing myself, right? I get that they're talking about these disparities, but like these are 5 different studies, all like done different ways, all doing entirely
different studies. They're different time periods.
Oh, okay, sure. Okay, so maybe these are different time period. Okay, maybe that'll help me understand it. So
these are the report from the USCC, United States Sentencing Commission.gov. This is the official numbers over these 5 time periods. So pick one. Let's pick the most recent, which is the yellow bar.
Okay.
Fair enough?
Sure.
Now, that would be from the time period, just so everyone knows what we're talking about, October 1st, 2011 through September 30th, 2016.
Sure.
That's the most recent data we have, correct?
Yep.
That data shows that the disparity between blacks and males is about 7.9%. The disparity between black females to white males is 27.1%.
Okay.
That's almost 3.5 times more disparity that white males are disadvantaged to black females.
One more time. So the white female, black female versus white male, you says 21%, right? And
27.1%. It's the yellow bar in the section that says black female versus white male.
I see 21.1.
Everyone that's watching me can see. It's this bar, 27.1.
Oh, I was looking at the wrong thing. I was on page 11.
White male.
Oh, yeah. 27.1. And then 10. Yeah, I got you. I was on page 11 on accident. Black female versus white male.
So let's round it up, just because I'm not good at math.
And then,
so let's say that the difference between blacks and white males is 8%, and we'll round down with black female to white male. The difference is 27%. So an 8% difference compared to a 27% difference.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
All right. Are you willing to concede finally that the biggest factor in the disparities between sentencing is sex and not race?
Okay, can you show me that these studies are absolutely controlling for violent crime, though? Because I don't know that that's the case.
So
I don't know that that's the case. If that's it's really simple. It's really, I got you. You can posture how you want to. It's really simple. If this thing controls for violent crime, I'm more than willing to concede that. I don't have a problem with data, and if that's the case, then yeah, that's it. This doesn't hurt me in any way, shape, or form. It's not like I'm reluctant to accept this. If it's true, it's true. I feel like in your brain you think I'm running from the data when in reality it's really simple. I just want to know if they're controlling for violence, and if that's the case, then I'm willing to accept that wholesale, like 100%. Like, yo, it seems like men are oppressed more so than black. Gender or sex is a more compelling factor than freaking race. I'm willing to give that up, easy. If they're controlling for that, and if that's the case, it doesn't change anything. Like that, there's still obviously more systemic oppression against black people, right? Being a black male seems like it would still be more harmful. So it's not like I'm losing anything in this debate, because my argument has always been that there is systemic oppression, which it sounds like you're conceding. It sounds like you also agree to the fact that black males are impacted by the system more so than white males. It sounds like you were willing to concede that black females more so than white females. So race is an incredibly compelling factor. And sex is also a compelling factor, and so these things probably work. There's a compound effect when you combine race and sex. So it sounds like black males specifically, would be getting an insanely longer sentence than their white female or than their white counterparts, right? Do you agree or not?
Here's what I'm going to do.
You're not going to agree?
Regression analysis begins with the decision.
So you're not going to answer my question? All right, this will be the final thought, bro. And then after that, then I'm just going to move on. I'm just going to go ahead and end it, because I clearly asked you a specific question, and you're not answering so you're not going to answer my question. You don't remember? You were just going to I got it. So you were just going to read? You You're going to read through your little paper as opposed to answering the question, so you're not even engaging in a conversation anymore. You're just trying to read data. So I accepted your data. I accepted your data, and now I'm moving forward in good faith, trying to keep a conversation, and instead of you doing that, you just want to read your paper. Get your panties out of a bundle for a second and actually interact with me here, instead of posturing the entire time to your audience. So the simple question I'm asking you, so the simple question that I was asking you, right? Really simple.
Ask me a question before that question.
Oh God. So yeah, bro, I don't know. I don't know. You don't want to have a conversation anymore, Rob. I feel like you're off the deep end, buddy. It's really fat. It's really okay. All right, I'll tell you what I'm talking about. Okay, good. All right. There we go. Thank you for the person who's been dominating the conversation this entire time. Really simply, are you willing to concede that black males have significantly are the most harshly impacted by our criminal justice system? Are you willing to concede that point?
I will answer the questions in the order you asked them. The first question you asked was, did they control for variables like criminal offenses? I will answer that question first because
we're past that
question, which I was prepared.
So if you're not going to answer my question, then we're good.
You'll concede they did control.
So you're not going to answer. If you're not going to answer my question, then that's fine.
I'll answer the next question as soon as we deal with this. So you're conceding they did control for that.
Well, show me where. Show me where.
Okay, that's exactly what I was attempting to do.
Before we get to can you just answer this simple question I asked you? It's a direct question. Look, all right. Look, you can answer, Rob. I'm about to check out. I'm about to check out of the conversation. It's really simple.
You will.
I got you. So I asked you a direct question. Can you answer my direct question?
I will answer your direct question
as
to whether or not they controlled for violent crimes.
No, answer. I just asked you a direct question. All right, Rob, you're posturing. I've asked you this question multiple times, and you haven't been willing to answer it or like previously. So at this point, I'm telling you, this conversation is going off the rails because you're like literally just the worst actor. Like this entire time, you keep going up. You want to talk about grandstanding, nigga? You are the king of grandstanding, Gish Gallop. You've been doing it the whole time. You posture to your audience. You don't. Okay, so yeah, exactly. Like now you want to get all in your feelings over me using a phrase. Freak out it. Well, clearly you're in your feelings. I'll say okay. So did I physically harm you with that?
Nope.
Oh, okay. So then it's your feelings. So your sentiments are bothered by it.
That has nothing to do with my feelings.
Sentiments aren't feelings.
Would it physically harm you if I call you that?
So no, you can't call me that. If you want to do so and get yourself banned, you can.
Would it physically harm you?
No, it wouldn't physically harm me.
It would hurt your feelings?
Yes, it would hurt my feelings. Yes, it would hurt my feelings.
Mr. Feelings here. Wow. Okay. Anyways,
wait, is that the win that you wanted? That's so deep. No, you're not gonna do that. Look, Rob, I get it. Because I feel like all this time I've been really honest and really fair within this conversation. Every time you've asked me a question, I've absolutely responded to your question, like almost immediately. I haven't beleaguered them every time you've been answering them, but literally every time I've been trying to ask you to ask you questions and stuff like that, you've like absolutely refused. So if that's the case, if you don't want to have a real conversation, this is the last appeal I'm going to make to you, Rob, because this is the second time you've done something that's silly. The last time when we were on your panel, we were having a thing, and then you literally told your moderator, I'm not going to have a conversation, I'm not going to talk anymore unless I get to finish this point, even though your moderator repeatedly told you to stop, told you over and over again. And now in this conversation, you've done it a second time when you sat there and you kept insisting on referencing a tabled conversation already, and then said, well, I'm not going to let you do definitions, being a petty little child, right? So if you're going to be a petulant little child, if you're going to be a petulant little child, then we can't actually have a decent conversation. And here you are a third time when I went through and asked you a direct question, and you've avoided it almost every time I've asked it. So either we can have a conversation in good faith, either we can have a conversation in good faith moving forward, and you're going to actually be decent and actually engage, or you're telling me right now you don't want to have the conversation. It's that simple. I'm asking you to be your higher self, and I promise you I will switch gears real quick, get far less combative, and we can have an actual decent conversation, or you can say that we've gotten too far and we can't really retrieve it. It's up to you.
Ask your question again.
Are you committing to being your higher self for the remainder of this conversation.
That's not what the question was. I'm committed to answer, yes. I'm going to engage.
No, that's not. I'm not just asking you to answer the question. I'm asking you, are you committing? I'm asking you, are you committing for the remainder of this conversation to be in good faith and to be as decent as possible? And I will do the same moving forward. Can you commit to that, or is this conversation irretrievable?
I will commit to that if you commit to it.
Okay.
You haven't, so.
Okay, sure.
Now ask your question again.
All right, so the question I was asking is, are you willing to concede that black men are the most oppressed within our criminal justice system, and that they are, and that oppression is still relevant and live today?
I answered this question already. I will answer it again. You were so emotional that you heard me directly answer this question. First, I answered it in a joke way, like the way you answer questions, where you say, well, it depends. We have to, does the study say this? Does it say that? Remember, I did that. And then you said, blah, 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 and I said, yes, I'll directly answer. And the direct answer is, this study does seem to suggest that there is a disparity between blacks and whites when it comes to sentencing guidelines. That is absolutely true. I answered that multiple times. You keep asking the same question. I answered it clearly. I clearly answered it. People
sentencing guidelines.
I clearly answered this question, and now you asked me a series of questions. You talked in like a 3-minute block, which is fine, and in that you asked a series of questions. The first question you asked was, did it control for things like crimes? Just like the last study did, yes, this study also did, which I began to read. But you flew off your high horse because you insisted that instead of answering your questions in the order that you asked, that I answer the question that you had already asked me and that I had already given a clear answer for. You insisted that I re-answer that for some reason. Instead of the question that you seemed, a question that seemed that you really wanted answered was, because you keep saying it, did it control for sentencing, or did it control for the crimes? Yes, it did. Now, was that answer concise enough for you?
I think so, sure.
Okay, now, may I ask you a question?
Sure.
Will you concede that this study shows that by a wide margin, sex is the more important aspect of being disadvantaged than race?
Yes, I will concede that by it seems like sex is a more big disadvantage than race. However, I'm not positive that they controlled for violent crime, and so if that's the case, if they didn't,
would you like me to answer that?
If they didn't do that, sure, if you can do so.
Page 3 talks about their methodologies. It says, multivariate regression analysis usually begins with the decision to examine an observed phenomenon or outcome. In the commission's work, the outcome observed are the sentences imposed in the cases. The researcher will develop a hypothesis as to the many possible factors that might produce that outcome. Among the factors considered by the commission were the type of offense, the sentencing considered by the commission.
Hold on. I'm sorry. I don't know where you're reading. I know you're on page 3. Which paragraph?
Page 3, second paragraph on the left.
Okay, can you start over? Because I'm going to read it with you.
Right, the factors that they looked at. So, sentence 5, among the factors, do you see it?
Yep, okay.
Considered by the commission were the type of offense, the sentencing range determined by the court using the commissioner's guideline manuals, and whether the offender was subject to a mandatory minimum penalty. The hypothesis is then tested using multivariate regression analysis to bring together data and the outcome and many possible factors that affect that outcome. The goal of the regression analysis is to determine whether there is an association between the factors being studied, and if so, to measure the extent at which each factor contributes. Researchers refer to the outcome, in this case the length of sentence imposed, as the dependent variable. The factors that might affect and might explain the outcome are referred to as independent variables or explanatory variables. The principal benefit of this analysis is that it controls for the effect of each factor in the analysis by comparing offenders who are similar to one another in relevant ways. By controlling for these factors to compare similarly situated offenders, this regression seeks to answer the question, if two offenders are in the similar certain ways, what other factors might be associated? It can't control for all factors because sufficient data and some factors are not readily available. For example, in its past reports, the commission noted some potentially relevant factors not included in its analysis, such as whether the offender's criminal history included violent conduct. So that's the methodology that they use.
I'm sorry, I got lost. You stopped. Did you cut out for a second? Did you stop reading?
I didn't think so. No, I kept reading. So if you just keep reading that, right, it says that, look, they tried their best to control to make things as similar as possible. To look at this.
Did you skip forward? Oh, yeah, I got you. Wonder can control all positive factors that might affect the outcome being studied because the factors not readily available. For example, as a past reports, the commission noted some potentially relevant factors were not included, such as whether the offender's criminal history included violent criminal conduct, the offender's family's ties, and the other employment history. Data was not readily available for those factors because the commission did not routinely. Okay.
I guess it seems.
You see the methodology?
Well, yeah. It seems. I guess I've just taken on faith because this doesn't say what you think it is. It's saying that they're controlled.
No, I'm not saying it. I don't think you know what I think I'm saying. This is just raw data.
Clearly, the question I was asking specifically was about whether or not they're controlling for violent crimes specifically, and if they're not, then that would be whatever. But it seems like what they're saying is that they're looking for violent crime within a person's criminal history, right? And using that
can't control for it. It hasn't been able to completely control for criminal history.
What? I'm sorry.
That's what it says. It's saying like it's literally.
I'm sorry. Let me see. For example, in the past reports, the commission noted some potentially relevant factors were not included in its analysis, such as whether the offender's criminal history included violent criminal conduct, the offender's family ties and employment, whatever. Data was not readily available for the factors because the commission did not routinely extract the information from the court document it receives. Therefore, for those prior analyses, the commission could not control for them. For this reason, caution should always be used when drawing conclusions based on multivariate regression analysis. Okay, so if they're not able to control for those things, it seems like, and obviously you recognize that since males are obviously more likely to have violence, or that, right, we were like overly representative of like violent crime in this country, then the idea that we wouldn't be able to study to find out if a person had violence in their criminal history that could greatly impact the outcomes, right, and that would be that would impact this data right now. And if they don't have that information, then it seems like my original contention seems pretty valid, right?
Right. I'm just reading the specific. What this is the average sentencing for the crimes that are committed, right? Now, so I was just reading because I found the methodology to see what it said, but you jumped down my throat. It actually was doing more to argue your point than mine.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think since we've like been decent, I haven't screamed at you at all. But it's fine. Right, okay. So moving. So in this situation. So then, just to be clear, you said you were. So this thing does agree with me that they are not controlling for the very most important thing that I've been talking about this whole time.
But listen. That's true. It says that it's difficult for them to control because what this is it's just giving the average sentence, right? But if you look at what it's saying, right, it's saying that like you can't use this to make an apples to apples comparison, but what you can do is look if there's huge disparities that seems to suggest, although there might be some variance in that percentage of disparity, we could look at the comparisons between specific groups and the percentage difference that we see. For example, it could be like, let's say that the disparity between white male offenders and black male offenders is 8%, right? Mm-hmm. It could be that actually, if we looked at violent criminals history and the type of crime and things like that, actually the disparity is only 2%, right? So it was 6%.
Or it could be 70 or something. Who knows?
It could, right? But what we can see is that suggests that there is a range, right? If we see that exact same measurement used that says 8% for one, and then when it comes to black female offenders versus white male offenders, it's 28%, then it seems to suggest that there is, even though there could be variance in those specific numbers, that there is a disparity that is greater between black female offenders and white male offenders than white male offenders and black male offenders.
Well, I don't think it works that way. I think it really depends on it really depends on the degree of the variable, right? Like, so say the variable, aka violence, we'll call that V, I don't know, has a value of like, I don't know, times 5. Right? So like multiplies whatever sentence you're getting times 5, right? And then if we know that males tend to be more violent than females, then while this data shows these disparities, then it's not really accounting for violence. And violence is specifically, I think, a hugely impactful thing. That's been my contention this entire time. And I'm glad now that you've at least read the methodology enough to be able to answer the question and concede that violence isn't being accounted for within this study. So yes, in a case in which we're going to ignore violence, then it would make all the sense in the world for men to be getting significantly longer sentences than women, and you can't just look at the outcome and say, oh man, look, there's some crazy disparity or disadvantage. It would probably be, I would say, the fact that men are significantly more violent than women, and that's what's causing this disparity. So in order for you to show me that this disparity would be there, you would need to control for violence, because I think you would concede that violence is a hugely impactful variable when it comes to sentencing, right?
Okay. But if fine,
at least thank you.
True. That please. Would you also concede that on average blacks are more violent than whites?
Sure.
Okay. So then can you show me the data that controls for all of these, that gives the difference between black male offenders and white male offenders, and between black female offenders and white male offenders?
Okay, let me find for the data that controls for specifically violence. This one was, I have one. It was specifically with regard to mandatory minimums. No, not mandatory minimum sentencing, sentencing enhancement. Let me find it really quickly. Give me just a few. There we are. Oh man, shoot. Here's the study. I have to go through it to find you the specific relevant part that talks about the methodology. But in this study, they did that. It says, using rich data linking federal cases from arrest through sentencing, we find the initial cases and defendant characteristics, including arrest, offense, and criminal history, can explain most of the large raw racial disparity in federal sentences, but significant gaps remain. Across the distribution, blacks receive sentences that are almost 10% longer than those of comparable white arrested for the same crimes. Most of this disparity can be explained by prosecutors' initial charging decisions, particularly the filing of charges carrying mandatory minimum sentences, whatever. The odds of black arrestees facing such a charge are 1.75 times higher than those of white arrestees. And I believe in this one that the end, like, because they controlled for all the variables, and I think in the very last paragraph it says something like there's a remaining 19% or something. If I just type.
Why is none of the studies linked? Why can't I click on them?
Wait, what? Oh, I'm sorry.
Why are none of the studies linked?
Wait, I thought I just linked you. I just linked you this one.
Right. So it's the Google Doc that says it's titled Documenting Systemic Racism in the United States of America, data compiled by Rose Rist with the help of source.
No. That's not the thing that I just linked.
That's not the one you're talking about?
Oh, I linked it to Disco. I'm so sorry, bro. I linked you a different one.
All right.
That's my bad. I DM'd it to a different person. That's this article. I'm sorry.
No problem.
Yeah, no, I just read what was the very first paragraph before introduction.
Okay. So let's try this again.
Yeah, I am in Disco's DMs. It's obvious. Disco helps me with debates when I'm in them sometimes.
That's fine. I don't mind that. Where does it give the methodology for this?
I guess we can look. But here, clearly, within this study, right, it says that they controlled for specifically the crimes committed, right?
But wait a minute. I did that with that's exactly what I did with Professor Starr's study, ironically also from the University of Michigan when it came to male to female. No. And you said that you wanted to see specifically their methodology. So I don't think I'm doing the same courtesy, right?
No, it literally says the exact words. I'm sorry. Did you read the first paragraph that I read to you? Do you remember? Because it says across the it was on the very first page, on the very first paragraph before introduction, and I'll just read this one sentence. It says, across the distribution, black receive sentences that are almost 10% longer than those of comparable whites arrested for the same crimes.
Right. So let me read.
For the exact same crimes.
I said, after controlling for the arrest, offense, criminal history, and other prior characteristics, men receive 63% longer sentences on average than women do. You said that wasn't sufficient.
Does that say that they're committing the exact same crimes? I'm sorry.
You said that I needed the actual methodology before you're willing to accept that.
No.
And it said it controlled for the arrest, the type of crime. Yeah, that's literally what you said. You said, your literal argument on that was, you said, well, I need to see how they did that. I need to see the methodology. Right. That's literally what you said.
Rob, right? I don't know. This is really getting crazy to me, because it sounds like now you're walking back your admission. You already admitted that they didn't control for violent crimes, and in this case, this one does. And I guess you're right. You know what? Maybe I'll go the extra step. Let's find the exact methodology where they say exactly that, because I know that they did it. I had read it before, but I'll find it.
I'm willing to accept this data. If you're willing to accept the study from the University of Michigan that I put forth saying that they controlled for those sort of things, if you're willing to accept that without going through the whole methodology, I'm willing to accept this study.
You admitted it. You already admitted, specifically we read that they didn't control for this.
Different study.
Okay, so maybe I'm mixing the studies up. I'm sorry. That might be my bad.
I've mentioned to you. After controlling for the arrest offense, criminal history, and other prior characteristics, men receive 63% larger sentences on average than women do.
Oh, yeah. So this is an article, and within the article, they had studies. You took me to the study that this thing is getting its data from, yet...
No, I didn't.
Oh, okay, so maybe I'm confused. Rob, I thought you kept telling me within this article, the thing that you're reading this line from, that there was a hyperlink that I just needed to click. Wasn't that correct?
Yes.
And then that hyperlink takes you to a study. And that study that we read is where it said that they didn't control for violence.
That is a separate study from the United States Sentencing Commission, not the study from the University of Michigan, which was the first study that I put the article, and then I put the link to the study there for you. Then I said, would you prefer that we look at the actual Sentence Commission, which is a separate study?
Okay, so then maybe I'm just getting lost in the sauce. Maybe there's too many.
I'm just saying, I'm willing to give you the same benefit of the doubt you'll give me. If you're willing to accept that my University of Michigan study that says that they controlled for arrest offense means that they controlled for these things, I'm willing to give you the benefit of the doubt that the study from the University of Michigan that you provide that says that they controlled for the types of crimes also did those.
Listen,
willing to do that?
I would say, as opposed to just giving me the benefit of the doubt, let me just go ahead and find it for you. That's what I would do.
Okay, you find the methodology.
I've literally read this before. I had to debate with this one psycho dude named Joey, and we went through like the actual study. So it's just a matter of me finding it again. I don't know. I feel like a window keeps disappearing for me, and I can't. I just gotta close it and reopen it. Yeah, let me find it. Yeah, to be honest with you, I don't know how long it's going to take me to find it. This is another thing.
Just to assume, unless you find something contradictory, that both of these studies tried to control with arresting records, correct?
Well, not just arresting records. Well, this one clearly stated it, but yeah,
type of crime.
Yeah. Like I would say that they were like arrested for the identical crimes, and they found that like prosecutors were more likely to introduce mandatory minimum sentences or specific charges that included mandatory minimum sentences for Black people. Like that's what this study says. The thing is, look, I don't want to do like a tit for tat. Like you accept mine, I accept yours. Like I have confidence in mine because I read that. And I don't know where to go to find it again.
And I've read the study before that I read and have confidence in it. I'm just saying that it seems that every time we go look at the data, that there seems to be a standard of the data that you're asking for me that needs to meet a certain standard. But with your standard, like you haven't been able to provide me the methodology.
What I would do?
You're asking me to accept it based on the fact that the study itself says in the abstract, basically, yes, we did control for this.
Choose not to. No. I'm more than comfortable with you choosing to withhold your acceptance of this data until I actually provide the methodology for you. The thing was, I didn't come prepared like specifically for this study. What I would gladly do, I would gladly have another conversation with you. Hell, we could do that Wednesday, Thursday. You choose the day. Okay, I got you. You choose the day. I will get the exact data on this specific thing. I will gladly look up specifically affirmative action. I will do those things. The thing is, you know that these debates are kind of just run of the mill. We barely came up with the specifics of the topic today of what we would even be discussing broadly. So then like to expect me to have all of that like specifically on hand, I don't. The same way that you don't. But I'm more than willing to entertain like a second conversation, a follow-up next week, next month, whenever the freak you want to, and we will actually go ahead and you can go on specifically that first study. I will go specifically on this. We will specifically go on affirmative action, and we can have actual like content-driven conversations.
So you're telling me you want to table this discussion right now because you can't provide the methodology?
I'm saying if you don't accept this data, which I think is perfectly within your grounds to do so, then I will find the methodology and improve it to you at a later time. Sure.
Right. So the point is this. If I do accept it, so we'll table that you don't have the methodology for it. Unlike you, I'm willing to accept that they tried to control for these things. We could get into the methodology, particularly at a later date. But obviously, if you hand me a 36-page document,
right,
you can't provide me exactly where the methodology is. That's going to be difficult to do. But let's assume that it's true. So it says the disparity is 10%. Right?
Is it, I think they have it at the end. The last
Blacks
paragraph.
receive sentences that are almost 10% longer than those comparable to whites.
Oh, sure. I guess so. Yeah.
It could be explained by prosecutors' initial charging decisions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you if it controlled for this. Did it control for geography?
I don't know. I don't believe so.
I don't think it did. I've never seen one of these.
I don't believe so.
So would you think that there could be, do you think that certain prosecutors that live in certain areas are more likely to give out longer sentences?
Yeah. Just really quick, here's the last sentence. This was it. It says, if one assumes that all black male sentences in federal and state court face an average race premium of 9%, eliminating the disparity would ultimately move nearly 1% of all the black men under the 35 in the United States from prisons and jails back to the community. So the actual total number is 9%. As I said, it was in the final paragraph, last sentence.
So it would eliminate 1%, right?
1% of all black males. Yeah.
Right. So that seems, no, don't get me wrong.
Wait,
of that
yeah.
1%.
Go ahead.
If you're of that 1%, that's a fucking huge deal. Don't get me wrong.
Sure.
Right. But that's hardly doesn't seem the problem that warrants the focus we have.
Oh, well,
let me get back to the original question.
Hold on, I got to respond to that. You just made that statement. Okay. Let me respond to that. Well, this thing really drilled down to get extremely specific about a specific thing. This thing was specifically addressing mandatory minimum, like charges that included mandatory minimum sentences, and in that they found a 10% disparity, or close to 9% disparity when controlling for all of these other factors, and like finding that they're saying this would affect 1%. Now, that doesn't mean like this is just one specific thing under the entire penumbra of criminal justice reform and the racism and systemic oppression within the criminal justice system. This thing got specific, so you got this really finite number of a small amount of people that would be affected. But you have to believe that there's a greater deal of injustice within the system overall that would largely affect significantly more people that aren't being charged specifically with mandatory minimum sentences.
But that's the sort of specificity that matters most, right? Because again, you conceded at the outset that just because there's a disparity in numbers doesn't prove that there's injustice or discrimination going on, right? Mm-hmm. So, for example, we need to be able to eliminate as many factors as possible and discuss what that would do. So, for example, just looking at this study quickly, I think the data set's from around 2007 or 2008, right? So this is, if you look at the Bureau of Justice statistics, we could see that actually the average sentencing is increasing of whites and decreasing for blacks even into the year of 2016. So it would be interesting to see if something has changed, because if we have, no doubt there was a time where there was more discrimination, right? But if we see that number is coming closer and closer, does it warrant the sort of radical changes that people were asking? The question I asked you is, the question that I wanted you to answer was, if you concede that geography isn't really being controlled, or we don't know if it's being controlled, would you concede, you did concede that specific prosecutors or judges in certain areas might be more inclined to give high sentences, correct? If that's the case, how can we be sure that this disparity isn't largely because prosecutors and judges that exist in high crime areas, which happen to be inner city areas where many blacks are charged, are just more likely, because they see that crime and the effects of it, to give longer sentences? Therefore, it wouldn't be a racial thing, it would be a geography thing.
Well, for one, I don't think most of the prosecutors reside in high crime areas or anything. Those people are completely removed from those things. Like prosecutors, they have a lot more money, so then they're not. That's not what's happening here. And like obviously, like most of the time when you're doing like when you're doing. Especially when you like talk about like a state like California, right? Like your cases are sent to the superior court. Like it's not like the courthouse is like in Compton, right? Like, so you're going to be going to Los Angeles, and then that's where your prosecutors are going to reside, and they're going to just have like purview over a whole bunch of different cases. That's one thing. Secondly, like this data again is not addressing systemic oppression as a whole. It's just addressing systemic oppression as it specifically applies to mandatory minimum sentences and controlling for every variable to end up like indicating this thing. And so that's 1%, but clearly it's not like a reference to everything else. Also, if the data is shrinking and it's showing like a decline in some of the outcomes, I think that's a positive thing. The problem is, like, if we start looking at charges that are happening in 2016 and things like that, or later, like, yes, we can see a shrinking, but that doesn't mean that we can't recognize that there are large amounts of people who are in the system currently based on previous problematic sentencing, right? For example, if a person got charged in 2010 for 15 years, they're still in the system right now, and they wouldn't be included in this shrinking data. If we eliminated all systemic oppression right now within the system, and it was perfect moving forward and completely equitable or whatever, then that wouldn't undo all of the harms caused by the unfair system and the impact that it's had on all of the various African American lives to date.
Okay, so there's a lot there that you said. So let's go in order. Try to go in order. First, again, you just assert, well, this would prove this is just one thing, and so there's a bunch of other things, but you're not giving any proof of that.
Oh, if you ask me for them, I'll give them to you. Sure, I can find you another one.
Sure. So give me. So you're saying that it's not just with mandatory minimums; it's with other things, right? So what's the numbers look like in that? Go ahead.
Sure. So let me see.
So I'll keep talking as you look this stuff up, right? So, secondly, the methodology you don't really have here. You say that you've read it, and I understand, but I don't get you giving an understanding of the methodology to ask specific things. When I talk about geography, you say, well, the prosecutors don't live in the inner city; they have more money, but they're voted on and appointed by people that live in these cities, and they are going to be concerned about what their constituents are concerned about more. For example, there's oftentimes talk about disparities in crack cocaine laws versus regular coke laws. One of the reasons that occurred was there were a lot of Black community leaders that saw how crack was ravaging their community in the late 70s and early 80s. And so they pushed for higher sentencing for crack.
No, they did not. No, they did not.
Sure they did.
Wait, you're saying Black people did?
Yes. People.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's a mischaracterization. No, that's not what they asked for. That's really, really...
what did they ask for?
What Black people asked for was higher... what was it? Drug prevention programs, after school programs, and higher medical intervention for addiction, and better employment opportunities. That's what they asked for. In fact, the African American Caucus drafted an entirely separate bill than the bill that Bill Clinton actually came up with, right? That Joe Biden wrote, and so they had an entire different idea of what they wanted for, and white people, I'm sorry, not white people, just whatever, the Democratic Party and Republicans agreed to it, just thought more police and harsher sentences. Black people never asked for harsher sentences for criminals. They asked for all those other things. I can find it for you.
Did the Black Caucus support the 94 crime bill?
Not initially. Again, they initially drafted their own bill specifically to counter that bill. And Republicans at that point said, if you don't go with this bill, we have a different bill that we're going to go for. If you don't go with the 94 crime bill, we have a different bill that we're going to suggest to you. And this bill, as they started drafting it, was significantly more draconian than the previous one. And so then reluctantly, and in order to not have to deal with the other bill that the Republicans were suggesting, blacks not just blacks, just everyone the Democrats in general went ahead and agreed to the bill that was on whatever. But a lot of people, as they were doing so, were very, very vocal in their opposition of the bill and on how harmful they thought it was and why they didn't genuinely support it. But they had no other choice. They were vocally dissenting about the bill as they were voting within party lines.
I don't believe in that could be that they changed their mind or something, but I don't know how we could say that Black voices didn't have a part in this bill if they actually spoke up in support of it and voted it. So, for example, there's two things to say on this. One, there were only 11 congressional Black caucus members who voted against the bill. In addition to the overwhelming amount that did support it, dozens of pastors who signed a letter in support of the bill also had the support of Black mayors. Curtis Schmuck,
we're talking about pastors.
Black mayor of Baltimore, was a vigorous supporter. Even then, U.S. Representative Kwasi Mafum, the chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus, who understood the bill was a means to find a better way to incarcerate people, eventually buckled. Not only supporting the bill, was ultimately responsible for its passage by rallying a majority of CBC members to vote for it after the bill was nearly derailed on the procedural issues. Now, in addition,
Wait, can you pause really quickly? Because you mentioned they eventually buckled, and I think that's the part that I think is the most important part, is that when we start talking about whether or not they ultimately voted for the bill, I don't think that tells the entire story. As I said, even the people who originally drafted an entirely different bill, most of them eventually capitulated, right? And then they went ahead and did this bill because of Republican opposition. But this bill never included the specific things that Black Americans were actually asking for. It wasn't that inner city people were literally championing this bill. It was was that inner city people were asking for a change with specific things that they were requesting, and then this bill was drafted in response, but it wasn't at all, it didn't actually contain within it any of the things that were requested by Black community leaders for the vast majority of them. Yes, there could have been some pastors who were in support of this crime bill. Yes, there can be individual mayors who are in support of whatever, but like that is not a representation of what the average opinion was of obviously the African American caucus, nor was it the opinion of just the average Black citizens and just Black voices. Like that wasn't it wasn't largely supported. Again, we had no choice in the end.
Again, I don't really buy that. They had no choice. Like, I don't think the infantilization of Black community leaders and Black politicians.
It's not infantilization. That's stupid.
Lightly, they ultimately supported this bill. And notice also that this was just talking about the '94 crime bill. Like, a lot of these crack laws actually started during the Nixon administration, which again, I could read evidence on that. What's less well known, many African-American leaders championed mandatory minimum sentences and tough on crime policy. These efforts were seen at the federal and state levels. Bakers and others argue that in the '60s, residents of Black neighborhoods felt constantly under threat from addicts and others associated with the drug trade, and their calls for increased safety measures resonated in community meetings, in the pages of Black newspapers like the Amsterdam News, and in churches. Reverend George McMurray was a lead pastor at the Mother AME Zion Church in Harlem in the '70s, when the city faced a major heroin epidemic. He wanted convicted drug dealers to spend the rest of their lives behind bars. When you send a few men to prison for life, someone's going to pass the word down. It's not good over here. Black support for the drug war didn't just grow in New York. At the federal level, members of the newly formed Congressional Black Caucus met with President Nixon, urging him to...
Wait, Rob, you're just reading an article, bro. Like, you're just reading an article. Right. Like, I don't need you to read an entire article.
Right. No,
you're reading an opinion piece.
No, that's not an opinion piece. It didn't say an opinion. It gave specifics that, for example, the original Black Congressional Caucus lobbied Nixon to increase sentencing for the war on drugs because they saw their communities being overran. That's not an opinion.
So right, but the overall, these are facts, right? Like, so there's a fact that there was there were pastors that like actually supported the war and all. I mean, supported the crime bill. Like these are facts, but that none of that contends with the position that the thing that I'm saying is that the Congressional Black Caucus, and again, you can call it infantilization if you want to. I don't care about your labeling. The Congressional Black Caucus vocally did not like this bill, literally drafted a bill in opposition to this bill, and eventually capitulated. Like, that's a fact. The community leaders, the large voice was about drug prevention program, better after-school programs, better employment opportunities. Those were the three major talking points from polls around that time about ways of addressing the epidemic, the crack epidemic and crime and gang violence and things during that time. None of those things were increased policing or increased sentencing. So, like, you can talk about the fact that there were individuals that did that, but that wasn't the prevailing voice.
Again, we can see that they ended up supporting, and that's only the 1994 point. I noticed that you didn't hit on anything about the original Congressional Black Caucus actually supporting things like mandatory minimum sentencing and supporting increased sentencing for these crimes. Right? It didn't just start in 1994.
So, yes, okay. The reason I got you. So if we're going to talk about mandatory, because that's a total different topic. If we want to start talking about mandatory minimum sentencing, they did support mandatory minimum sentencing because mandatory minimum sentencing was meant to address what was a large-scale problem, which was judicial discretion, which was largely contributing towards just criminal justice or sentencing outcomes. And at that point, I think that was they created the Sentencing Commission in 1986, I want to say. And specifically, the idea was if we take away judicial discretion and then say, these sentences will be mandatory minimum, whatever, it'll end up creating like a more common outcomes for blacks and whites. But what ended up happening was, with the introduction of mandatory minimum sentences, then that shifted judicial discretion towards prosecutorial discretion, to where now prosecutors have the ability to use to levy specific charges that carry mandatory minimum sentences, and those things are being used on black people disparately in comparison to their white counterparts. And so now we saw a dramatic uptick in sentencing that happened for both blacks for black people in comparison to their white counterparts. Sentencing increased in general with the introduction of mandatory minimum sentences, but they increased significantly higher for black people than they did for white people.
Again, right? It doesn't. A lot of that had to do because people wanted increased sentencing in these neighborhoods.
No, that was not their reasoning. They never said that.
You say that, but I literally just read to you an article. Please show me an article.
Okay, I'll find it.
Show me an article that says that there weren't people in the black community that wanted harsher sentencing because they were tired of their community being overrun.
No. That's not the claim that you made. You made the claim that they supported mandatory minimum sentences specifically because they wanted harsher sentences. And the mandatory minimum sentences were not to create harsher sentences. The intent behind mandatory minimum sentences was to get rid of the disparity in outcome for sentencing between blacks and whites. There was an entire sentencing commission that was created for that in 1986, and that was their stated goal.
Again, we're talking about the 60s. I'm willing to see your evidence, right? Again,
mandatory minimum sentences were introduced in 1986.
Again, many African-American leaders championed those mandatory sentences and tough on crime policies. They supported things like mandatory minimum, and they supported increasing the punishment for these sort of things, starting back in the Nixon administration, because they saw their communities being overwhelmed. Right. And to just say, no, that's not what anyone, it just denies reality. Today, there continues to be people that are black that live in inner cities that are for harsher crimes, including prosecutors, judges, and people that live in these communities are for harsher penalties for these crimes because they feel that their communities are war zones and that their children aren't safe to be grown up in because there are people that are committing drug crimes, violent crimes, and things like that.
Yeah.
Whitewash that and say, no, that this is all an example of, well, they were forced to vote for this stuff because the better plan that they had was rejected by Republicans. So blacks were forced to vote for this stuff. It's just like, this is a point that we can labor all night if you want.
I don't think you know what you're talking about. So beginning in the mid-1970s, Congress began to lengthen sentences, culminating in the 1984 Comprehensive Crime Control Act, which established mandatory minimum sentences and eliminated federal parole. So, I don't know what you're talking about in the 60s, but clearly mandatory minimum sentences were created. I thought they were created in 1986, but it was in the 80s. I said 1986. I guess it was 84. That's when this was created. So no, this wasn't something from the 60s. And the intent behind mandatory minimum sentences, as stated by the sentencing commission, that was specifically to address disparities in outcome in sentencing. I don't know what you're talking about the 60s. That has nothing to do with mandatory minimum sentences.
First mandatory minimum sentence law in New York was passed in 1973.
Okay, let me find it. Hold on. I don't know why I'm reading 1984. Wait.
You might.
Okay, I probably am talking federal as opposed to state.
So again.
Okay, so then maybe we're talking past each other. I do not purport in any capacity to know in each individual state laws because those things are obviously crazy. But clearly at a federal level, we didn't introduce those until 1980.
Listen,
into the 80s.
I'm not expecting you or me to know all this, but you were quick to jump on. I didn't know what I was talking about.
Just
going off the article.
If we're talking about, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. Look, you found an individual state to support what you were talking about, but clearly, when we're talking about mandatory minimum sentences, we wouldn't be talking about an individual state. We'd be probably talking about more of a federal, the federal level, where it's widespread, where it's affecting a large amount of people. If you were just only talking about New York, then I probably would have conceded that preemptively, because I don't know individual state laws besides California.
But that's sort of the issue, right? That there were specific high crime cities that were predominantly black, where people supported this sort of stuff because they saw their neighborhoods being overwhelmed. And in fact, I actually read you a quote from Reverend George McMurray, who was the leader of one of the large black churches in Harlem in the 70s, who said that he specifically wanted heroin dealers to spend the rest of their life in jail. I read that. So the idea that there weren't black community leaders that didn't want harsh sentences, then in reality, that's not true, right? Okay. And again, it makes sense.
So
right? If you live it's a belabored point anyways, but the only point I'm trying to make in this is there are a lot of people that want to speak as if black people are monolithic, right? That's not true. There are a lot of diverse opinions amongst any race, including black people, where they might decide, I see my community being overwhelmed, so I'm for harsher sentences. And if you're a prosecutor, judge, or police officer in that area, you might be more inclined to push for those harsher sentences because you see that crime being far more impactful to that neighborhood.
All right, so here we go.
And in fact, last thing I'll say, this seems to be backed up by the fact that I don't have the studies in front of me, but I could look for it if you want. I have read studies that suggest that actually Black judges and prosecutors are more likely to push for harder sentencing.
Okay, that's fine. So just to be clear really quickly, the Sentencing Reform Act, part of the Comprehensive Crime Control Act of 1984, was a U.S. federal statute intended to increase consistency in United States federal sentencing. It established the United States Sentencing Commission. It also about whatever, so on and so forth. Like, that was the intention behind like the Sentencing Reform Act, specifically to like make sure that there wasn't disparity in like sentencing, because they were seeing that there was like crazy racial disparities. But what actually happened as a result was then they ended up taking away judicial discretion and gave it to prosecutors, and then prosecutors ended up being able to like start charging Black people specifically with these crimes, even when they were similarly situated to whites, and then that resulted in these crazy outcomes. That's one. Two, again, like, I'm not saying that Black people are a monolith, but obviously, again, like, you can cherry pick and find individuals that supported this, but largely we have poll data that would clearly indicate that Black people were not in favor of harsher sentences, but were instead asking for drug prevention programs, better after-school programs, and better employment opportunities as a response. I can find it as a response to the drug epidemic, and then what we got was something entirely different. And then even though we got that thing, again, we reluctantly signed that because there was an entirely separate bill that was drafted by the Black Caucus. They were it started getting contentious. Republicans introduced another draconian bill, and then that was like, wait a minute, if we don't accept this bill, we're going to have to start continuing with Republicans for this even worse bill. And so then reluctantly Black people signed that bill because that's the way the politics works. It's not a matter of infantilization. It's just the realization that if we didn't pass this thing, there was another thing that was going to be significantly more harmful, and that's why that ended up happening. Yeah, so I don't even know how we're arguing about this, but let's find poll data.
So let's see poll data around the 70s in New York.
No. We're talking about the crime bill of 94. What?
No, that's not. The crime bill was something you were talking about. We were talking about as far back as the 60s and 70s.
I've not engaged in that whatsoever. I was only talking about I was talking about the crime bill. That's all I've been engaging in. If you've been on some sidebar, I wasn't engaging in it. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, so then we don't have any evidence that suggests. What we do know is Black community leaders were pushing for stronger drug laws in the late 60s and 70s. We don't have any poll data to suggest if that was popular in these inner cities or Black communities.
Okay, I don't listen. What I can say is I have literally no idea what you're talking about regarding the 60s and 70s. Like, and that I don't know that information. I don't know that data. So I don't know. I have literally no information on that. The thing that I've been talking about was specifically the crime bill. So anything else you're talking about is completely extraneous, and I can't support or condone or I can't support any of that information. I don't know what the freak you're talking about. It has nothing to do with what I've been engaging in, which was specifically to address the crime bill in 1994.
Okay, well, when we got on this first, we were talking about crack laws and things like that. That was before the 94. But whatever. It's a belabored point anyways. It's not really important. I'm just saying that there are mitigating factors. Well, let's concede some things, right? So let me concede that there probably is sentencing disparities between Blacks and whites. I'd say that's true. I don't know what the numbers are.
Your data suggested that. What do you mean probably? What do you mean probably? Your data suggested that as well. Even your data said that there were differences.
If you'll let me finish, you then said that we can't look at that data because it doesn't completely control for violent crime.
I said I can't look at that data. I'm not accepting that data until I'm aware of that. You accepted that data. You believe in that data, so you should be conceding this point. In the same sense, when I was talking about my data, I said I can't give you I said it's perfectly fine for you to deny this data until I show you the methodology. However, I've accepted that data wholesale, having read that study before, which is why I was able to identify what was in the last sentence, and I was able to identify whatever. I knew what it was claiming, and I knew specifics of that study. I read it all the way through. So I'm willing to accept that data. Hold on. So I'm just saying I'm willing to accept that data, but because I don't have the proof right now for you with specificity, because I didn't come prepared specifically to talk about it, then I can't convey that to you in a convincing manner. You would have to take some of that on my word, and I don't expect you to do that. I think you're perfectly within your grounds not to do so. In the same sense, you have your data that you believe and you accept, and you can go with that. I know. Wait.
Tirade for fucking 5 minutes when I said I will concede.
Rob, again, you've done the vast majority. Rob, again, you've done the vast majority. You have done the vast majority of talking in this conversation, so you will kindly shut the hell up while I finish. I'm willing to concede. Okay, that's cool.
You're a worthless sack of shit.
All right. Yo! Yo! That's magic, bro. He got so mad. I was chill. I wasn't even being OD. I feel like I was being chill and like relaxing and talking to him, and I wasn't even going ham. What the freak? That dude, he's just really, really, really upset. Bro, he got his panties. Man, he got his panties in a bundle the entire time. That I don't understand. That was magic. I don't know what to say. Let's talk about something. Somebody indicated to me that this nigga in his chat, someone said black people should pay reparations to white people for allowing them to live here. And when someone pointed out, like, hey, that's really, really problematic, their mod, Roy Reiser, he said those comments are fine because they aren't against TOS.